All right, gentlemen, we're live, just like that. The magic of live television. No need to adjust your sets, folks. Two of the most handsome men in their mid-50s that ever walked the face of this earth are joining you today. That's right, I got Mr. Phil Strader, Mr. Mike Seeklander, and of course, me, your ever favorite cymbal banging monkey. And today we're going to be talking about the smoke surrounding the Sig P320. Is it real? Is it not real? What do you think, Mike?
I don't know if it's real or not, but before we do this, front end of the show, folks, as you know, welcome to the American Warrior Show, the podcast, the American Warrior Society. And we're going to get into it and kind of skip some of the sponsor reads. We'll talk about sponsors. As you all know, we have a website, AmericanWarriorShow.com, and sponsors are listed on our primary page. I'll be talking about the featured sponsored in the pre-read, and so we can jump right into the show because this one is critical. And one of the things that we talked about, and I had dinner with Phil recently, and then later on talked to Rich about this, and we wanted to bring this information to you, our audience, whether that's on the American Warrior Society Facebook page or one of the YouTube pages you might be watching it on. There are a lot of folks in the audiences, my alumni, my students, my people that have said, hey, Mike, what's the deal with the 320? Is this factual? Should we be worried about them? I've got private students. I've got team shooters because most of you may or may not know that Wilson Combat makes a collaboration gun with Sig, actually several collaboration guns, the Sig 365 as well as the 320, where there's a modified version with a Wilson Combat grip frame. And we wanted to be able to bring some of this stuff out and say, hey, here is what we know about the Sig. And of course, there is no person that knows more about the Sig 320 line, in my opinion, other than Phil Strader, at least from a bird's eye view, because he was in charge of the product for a long time. We'll let him talk about that. So if you're on right now and you're watching this and you were wondering, please give it a share, and I'll weigh in as we go. I've got my primary and backup competition guns that I've shot for many years, which an incredible round count on both of those guns. And welcome to the show, Mr. Phil Strader.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you here, man. So fair use, copyrighted material, blah blah blah. I'm not a lawyer. Don't play one on TV, but just so you know, a lot of this stuff that I'm aggregating off the internet to bring you a little bit of a display of some of the things that I have found and kind of looking into the 320. And I want to give some background here, just so those who don't know. I watched Phil's on the Military Arms Channel YouTube show. I thought there was some issues that weren't addressed. I was hoping were going to be addressed. They weren't. And then the internet does what it does, and it's saying everybody's a shill for Sig and all this crap, and I want to dispel all that. So who the hell is Phil Strader? He's been active in law enforcement and the firearms industry for over 25 years. Since 2000, Phil has won over 70 major shooting competitions, including national championships, world speed shooting divisional wins, and numerous world shoot U.S. team wins. He was previously the president of the U.S. PSA and currently vice president of consumer affairs at Sig Sauer, Inc. So that's who's going to be on today talking about the Sig P320. Mike, of course, you guys are probably well aware, but let's go ahead and get the bios out of the way. Professional sponsored shooter, owner of Shooting Performance LLC, the co-owner of the American Warrior Society. Previously, Mike was the COO and director of training at the United States Shooting Academy, where Mr. Phil Strader was as well. Not in his bio, but that's where I first met Shill out there in Shill. That's where I first met.
Holy cow.
I'm sorry, man.
I used to confuse Phil with Shill. I work for the company. Of course, I'm a shill for the company. I work for them.
Yeah, I'm a shill for American Warrior Society. I don't know what to tell you. Let's get all that out. But yeah, that's where I met.
Holy cow.
That's where I met Phil. Oh, God, 15, almost 20 years ago. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
But previously, Mike was the branch chief and lead instructor of the Firearms Division of the Federal Air Marshal Service and a senior instructor at FLETC. Me, I'm just a retired Marine, former cop, half-ass author, podcaster. So speaking of shills for Sig, man, let's get everybody's relationship to Sig out of the way. I have zero relationship with Sig Sauer. I've never owned a Sig, don't shoot Sigs.
What?
No. The only thing I carry of Sig is I carry your duty ammo. But other than that, I've never got a penny from Sig, never probably will get a penny from Sig. So yeah, that's my relationship to Sig Sauer.
We'll pay you the same exact amount we paid Tim Harmson, the Military Arms Channel. Although the internet would have you think different.
Exactly.
Hey, well, you don't carry a 365? I mean,
My brother does. I don't. No, I carry a Glock 45, pal. That's my daily carry
I have a couple of those.
with a Streamlight 7A on it. Mike, what's your relationship with Sig? You want to get that out of the way?
I've taught at the Sig Academy. I have a relationship with Phil Strader and, of course, Max Michelle for many years. I certainly would say I am aware of the company, and a lot of folks know me there, but I have no financial relationship. Of course, Wilson Combat has a collaboration with Sig, but full disclosure, with Wilson Combat, in the divisions that I compete in, I can compete with a Sig 320 variant. I can compete with a Wilson Combat modified Glock variant. I can compete with a Wilson Combat modified or Beretta variant in the many divisions that I shoot across the board. So I'm not required to shoot a Sig. It's been my choice for many years because of the grip angle and the trigger and a lot of the features of the gun itself. I've had great successes with the 320. As a matter of fact, most of the team members on Wilson Combat shoot Wilson Combat collaboration 320s, and but otherwise I have no official relationship with the company other than having taught at the Sig Sauer Academy as a guest instructor.
Thanks, Mike. And Phil, you are obviously the Vice President for Consumer Affairs. Congratulations on that role as of what, March? So you obviously have a financial relationship with Sig.
Yeah, I have a vested interest, but I mean, but listen, I'll say this, I'll put this out there, and listen, I can tell you this, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but just having a representative of the company of Sig Sauer on your show to give us the opportunity to talk about what's really going on, you're not going to get the best comments. So I'm just preparing you guys for that today. You know, it's a shame that's how it is, but that's how it is. But what I can tell you is, you know, you mentioned I'm a former law enforcement officer, and I am, and you know, and I have a very close relationship with Mike, and Mike can speak for my character as much as anyone else. In no way, shape, or form would I ever sell myself out or know something was wrong with a product that we make and not say something about it. And you know, of the 3,500 people that work for us, a third of us are former law enforcement, former military. And you know, there's a code of, you guys know, I mean, you both served, you both were law enforcement, you both were military. You know that there's a level of, you know, there's a level of, I guess you could call it honor or self-respect or just a sense of what's right that are really our 1,200 plus former military veterans, law enforcement veterans, really going to turn a blind eye if they knew something was going on at SIG that was unsafe? Not one of them would go to one of their superiors and say, "Hey, there's something going on here." So, you know, I will say, yes, I work for the company, and if the company were doing something that I wasn't comfortable with, I wouldn't sit here and tell them that. You know, I wouldn't sit here and put the SIG hat on and just say everything's fine. I mean, obviously, we're getting a lot of attention right now. We're getting hit up with a lot of lawsuits. Luckily, most of those lawsuits are getting you know, dismissed, and they're definitely going away. But you know, that's kind of my background. But yes, I do work for the company, and I'm going to represent what's really going on with the company, which in this case is our best interest, obviously. I mean, I won't be just doing it here. I'll be doing it everywhere. It's my new job. So.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. When I saw people just tearing you apart in the one or two interviews that you've given thus far, I'm like, you know, they're kind of shitting on your character and stuff like that. I'm like, this is not the Phil that I've known for almost 20 years. I took umbrage with it, and I'm glad Mike kind of put this together. But Alan Kelly's on today, is retired Virginia State Police. He says the Virginia State Police has issued the P320 and no issues have been noted. I still have contacts within the agency. They let retirees buy the exact same 320 that was issued. No issues with mine. Brian is on. Our good friend, Mr. Bob Bill up in Montana, is on. Dr. Gordon Botson is on. Lots of folks. Please like and hit that share button, guys. We're going to jump into this thing. So now that we got all that crap out of the way, I want to discuss too what we're not going to talk about, because I think a lot of the gun community are conflating a lot of issues, right? I think there was a drop issue pre-2017 that, and Phil, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff. I think you guys resolved the issue to, as I understand it, there was a trigger weight issue that was allowing for inertia to actuate the trigger and causing it to travel to the rear only at specific angles and only around 40-ish% of the time. But y'all did a voluntary recall, if I understand it, you got it squared away. Is that true?
Close. I mean, that's pretty close. Yeah. But to be fair, and I don't mind talking about it because a lot of people don't know this, is when the P320 first came out, we were testing to basically the industry was testing to SAMI, right? Every gun industry that's worth a shit anyway. Will test to rough handling, right? They'll do a drop test and they'll do what's called a SAMI drop, which is 4 feet on a durometer rubber mat placed on top of concrete at 6 different angles. Left side, right side, up, down, and I think top, bottom, muzzle down, muzzle up, top, upside down. So there's 6 angles. There's also a NATO spec that goes to 5 feet, goes up higher, 5 feet, and it's on bare concrete. They also drop to 6 angles, same angles. So what we did is we dropped to both, right? We knew that was a standard, that was a spec. We wanted to design a pistol that you didn't have to pull the trigger to take the gun apart because we know what was happening when agencies were first getting issued guns. You had to pull the trigger on to take them apart. So we wanted to design a gun that didn't need that to happen. You just take the gun apart without pulling the trigger. And we also wanted a gun that could survive and perform well in rough handling specs that were being tested at the time without a tab trigger. Because the tab trigger, just let's get this squared away. If you guys say the word trigger safety, I'm not gonna really acknowledge a tab trigger as a safety because you deactivate a tab trigger by pulling the trigger, right? So the tab trigger.
Let's come back to that, but I'm
come back.
Yeah.
But they were their design purpose was to ensure that the guns would survive SAMI or NATO drop. That was their design purpose. And if you don't believe me, I'm sure I can dig up a video of other people taking the tab triggers off of pistols and dropping them muzzles up and having the same results. But anyway, so that's what happened. We designed a pistol that had the balanced trigger. The trigger comes to the rear. The trigger bar goes forward as the trigger comes to the rear. Kept it within the specs of NATO drop. In fact, not only did we go to NATO, which was the higher specification, we added 6 orientations to the already 6 that were normal. So we doubled the orientations at NATO drop just to make sure that the guns passed. We didn't test at 6 feet because the industry wasn't testing at 6 feet. The industry was testing at what would be a nominal height. 5 feet is where you would hold the gun. And that's why I'm guessing that's why the industry typically tested to these standards. So that's what we did. And yes, to your point, in 2017, there was a height and an angle that was presented, and we were made aware of it. That was outside of these specs. It was a negative 30-degree angle. And yes, that high enough drop at that angle we were able to replicate it, could make the trigger move to the rear. And once we received the information that this is a possibility through the internet, obviously we don't believe everything we see on the internet. We started testing internally to verify that this was a possibility. I think 40% is pretty high. We were able to replicate it, but it was very rare that we replicated it. It had to be 6 feet or higher for us to replicate that. So what do? We made changes to ensure that the gun would pass 6 feet, and we actually added another 14 orientations. So now basically any firearm we make, including the P320, after this date, we started dropping at 6 feet at 26 orientations, and we take 5 guns out of that sample, and we drop every 5 guns, all 5 guns at those 26 orientations at 6 feet on concrete. And so that's 130 drops compared to everyone else's 6. So it definitely has the reputation for being the don't drop it gun, but no one does destructive testing and drop testing like we do. In fact, that's a video that we hopefully will be coming out soon, where we actually brought someone in and let them look at our apparatus that actually drops the guns and that kind of thing. So,
well, and see, that's my point. I don't want to conflate all the stuff that you guys have worked your ass off to fix with what I think is happening now. And I think the drop issue,
agreed,
as far as I'm concerned, is over. You guys.
No, I agree. But for me, it goes a little further for me because it shows the example of Sig Sauer under basically the same leadership that we're under now, because the leadership gets beat all to hell too, right?
Oh yeah, big time.
The company under the same leadership that it has now, we were told about a problem. We tried to replicate that problem. When we confirmed that this problem could be replicated and it possibly was an issue, even though it was within the specifications of every other gun company, we did something about it, right? We acted quickly in record time to do something about it. Then we offered everyone who had a gun to send it back for free. We would fix it and we would send it right back to them. So the point of that is if we think there's an issue, obviously we're gonna say, okay, so let's hold off, let's stop. There's a problem here. Let's look into it. Let's test it. Let's find out what we need to do to fix it, and we fix it. So we have a track record of going above and beyond. I mean, the voluntary upgrade that we did, each gun costs us between manpower, shipping, parts, labor, everything else costs about $100 to $125 a gun, right? And we would have taken back every single pistol at the time. It was probably around 500,000 guns. We were taking them all back, and we would have eaten that cost, and we were willing to. Now, no, I mean 25% of the people who wanted to bring them back did, but point is we saw an issue and we reacted. We reacted in a way that we confirmed there was an issue, we acknowledged there was an issue, and we acted, and we did what we had to do. So anyway,
and a lot of these additional standards really, I agree. You guys did NATO, you did SAMI, you did your own, made up your own tests and added on to the top of all the other testing that's required. And you won the Army contract. So a lot of the issues, like with the trigger splintering, the double ejections, issues with ball ammo, means around between stoppages, lack of slide lock back, those are some things that during the initial testing that the Army did, that they put out an executive summary. Everybody can read it. But again, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, Phil, you correct me if I'm wrong, those have been addressed and fixed, right?
Right. Well, yeah, and a lot of the functioning issues, not and I don't want to get hammered for this, but a lot of the function issues were ammo related. I mean, the ammunition we were having to use, we were forced to use certain type of ammunition. It was only that ammunition we were having problems with. So, the M17, when we started making some small changes to make that ammunition, that gun work better with that ammunition.
But what was the problem with ammo? Because as I understand it, was just 115 grain ball. I mean, what?
Well, the 115 grain ball, I can't speak to what was going on with that. What we were required to shoot with was, I can't remember the designator. I think it was 1152 or 1153. It was 147 grain flat point ammo that was designed to kind of look like the general purpose or whatever the specialty ammo is called. It's not hollow point, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were having issues with that ammo. In fact, when we were putting out surplus M17s, we had to make it very clear. We had to make it known to the people that were receiving these pistols that these guns had been optimized for that certain type of ammo. So we were letting people know that, look, it's probably going to work with everything else, but this gun's been optimized for the ammo of the contract. These were true contract overrun guns. So I know that we had to do a lot of tweaking to the M17 platform to make it work well with that ammunition. So that I do know. But again, my visibility to the military and the defense contracts is limited, but I do remember that part.
And here's what a lot of people that are they're not maybe as long in the tooth as you and I and Mr. Seeklander. He's probably way older than all of us, though, just judging by that beard. But I full disclosure, man, I had a negligent discharge with a Beretta 92 in France and got fired off of the thing I was doing at the time. And I remember when they fired me and read me my rights and all this stuff, and they're like, "Yeah, we're going to do it. Don't worry though. We're going to do an LTI on the weapon and make sure." I'm like, "You don't need to do it. I'm telling you right now, the weapon operated as it was designed. I did it. It was my negligence. I put my finger on the trigger, I pulled the trigger, and the gun went bang." And I've, when I was a police officer, our SWAT team commander shot himself through the hand with his Glock. He would tell you the same thing. He put his finger on the trigger, and the gun design has performed. So So that's a little bit of full disclosure, because Glock went through a lot of the same damn problems that I think Phil's P320 is going through right now. In the early days, NYPD's like, oh my God, these things are just going off. I can't set one on the desk without it just firing. Of course. So what does Glock do? They respond to it. They put the heavier trigger in there. I think it was like a 12-pound New York trigger. Like, oh my God, it was just hell. Because I think, and Mike, if you could speak to this, because Mike was with KPD after, but there was a huge case with Glock allegedly just shooting someone in the head, and what they found was something different, right, Mike?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the details of that because that officer was my partner. And long story short, but the bottom line was the trigger was pulled. There were some training related issues back in the day when a lot of police officers carried revolvers. It was not uncommon for someone to have their finger on the double action trigger of a revolver out of the holster very early, where that certainly changed with the semi-automatic pistol, the Glock being the predominant one, along with maybe some Smith & Wessons that came out very, very, very early when a lot of police departments transitioned over from a semi-auto to a revolver type trigger. But Rich, as you're going along this, I keep thinking in my head that there was a 2017 issue, which we're not going to get into because it's pretty clear what happened, what Sig did. But here's the bottom line, and not to be the naysayer, but I personally reached out to Phil. I personally reached out to Max Michel. I personally reached out to our company, Wilson Combat, in the very beginnings, and I said, hey, guys, what is going on with the 320? Because the internet is so plagued with individuals, and there's so many purported videos, and I know, Rich, you're going to talk about these here in a second, showing 320s discharged, holstered on a regular basis, and we haven't touched that. But my point is, I reached out because I was being swayed to the point where I didn't know if I wanted to compete with this gun. I was afraid of it. I didn't know mechanically if there was something I was missing. So I'm like, hey, on the lowdown, Phil, is there something going on that I need to know about? Max, is there something I need to know that's going on? And, I can tell you that certainly both of them are like, absolutely 100% not. But people may say, well, Mike, you're buddies with Phil, you're buddies with Max Michel. And the reality is, the first person I talked to was Guy Zuber, who's our team coordinator over at Wilson Combat. And I said, Guy, we've sold how many of these Wilson Combat collaborations that Wilson Combat and Sig make? 320 variant with the grip. Everything else is the same. All the internals are the same. And he said, partially a curse word, but he said a metric F ton of these things, like literally. And I said, how many of the team members have them and are competing with them? And he said, every one of the team members has one and probably has competed with one. And the amount of rounds we have put through those guns, I know that the guys from GBRS group got on recently with you guys, Phil, and got poo-pooed all over because they said, hey, we put a lot of rounds through these guns. Well, I guarantee it, Wilson Combat is kind of like, I don't know, not saying a lot right now, but I can tell you as a Wilson Combat shooter that's been around the team members, we have put lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of rounds to those guns. So I was simply reaching out because I'm not required to shoot a 320, Rich. I don't have to. I can go shoot a Glock, and maybe it's almost as good as I can shoot a 320, although I like the trigger on 320 a lot better. But the bottom line is I shoot Glocks a lot in classes that I teach in. So I'm not required to. I don't have any allegiance to the company. I'm not required. I just wanted to know, is the gun good to go? And the answers I got were very interesting. But the mathematics behind it, like literally the thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds that my training buddy and the team members and everybody, and the answer from Guy at Wilson Combat was, we've had zero issues, like none, not any issues whatsoever with the 320. So I'm like, okay. And that's when I reached out to Phil and Max. And I'll let Phil weigh in on that, but I want to get right to the heat of it, folks. We're going to dig into, what is
Hey, I'll tell you a little secret, Mike.
Yeah.
I'm not required to shoot a 320 either. I can shoot
Really?
whatever I want. I can shoot a 226. I used to shoot a 226, and I shot it well. If I thought there was a problem with the P320, and I've said this is actually what I've said to some people who trust me, who know me. I got kids. I don't like them that much, but I still have kids, and I have a wife, and they're okay. But I don't want to abandon them. I don't want to leave them. I don't want to shoot myself in a femoral artery any more than anyone else does and die on the range. So if I thought there was a problem with the P320, I wouldn't be competing with it. I wouldn't be shooting it. I wouldn't be trying to, break sub-second draws out of the holster and sub-second reloads if I thought the gun was defective. I mean, my gun, shockingly to the world out there, apparently, it shoots every time I pull the trigger, and then never, and when I don't, it doesn't. So, and I take that confidence every time I go to the range. I take that confidence with me, and that's, you're right. I don't have to shoot one either, but I do because I like it and because I trust it and because it shoots better than any other production gun out there, in my opinion.
Well, and I'm going to add one more to that. I reached out to Max probably before I spoke to you, Phil, because you were busy. And for those that don't know, I'm good friends with Max Michelle. I've known him many, many years as well. We still train together. I hang out with a guy. He has been bashed pretty hard because of the 320. He has been bashed pretty hard and mentioned on the internet as a sellout. And I think a lot of those things are incredibly low blows and comments that shouldn't be said. Shill, sellout, sponsored shooter. And maybe technically Max, because Max has a 320 line, maybe he is more so required, but Max is a married man, is a smart man. And I've shot his guns and I've shot his triggers, and they're unbelievably light, good triggers on a Sig 320 variant. But Max is a smart guy. He's a good friend of mine, and he would not, if we logic through this, think about this, myself, Phil, and Max knowingly holstering and drawing hundreds of thousands of times a firearm that is potentially dangerous. If any of us knew that, I myself certainly wouldn't shoot the gun. I know Max wouldn't shoot the gun. And by the way, that's the problem with the internet. I'll bring a great example. There were, a lot of folks 5-6 years ago that if you weren't wearing a mask, they would spit in your face and slap your face and curse at you from across the street because the mask was saving the planet. And the mask that everybody mandated was the thing that needed to be worn, and it was absolutely mandatory. And, later on, opinions have completely changed. It's funny to watch society roll like a snowball down a hill and how big it gets. It doesn't mean the snowball is right or wrong. It just rolls like a snowball. Now, I'm not saying that's the case with the Sig. Who knows? There could be a fault they find out tomorrow with this gun. I don't know that.
I hope so. I pray every day that we find something.
Well, I'm going to
give me something.
To the end of the show. I'm going to tell you if there's an issue. I'm going to tell you where I think it is. And
please do. I need to know because I
What?
promise you we've tested it, but I want to know.
I've no doubt you have tested it. No question about it. Thank you to the 30-ish folks watching live across multiple platforms, and for everybody that are watching the. And
I just shared, by the way. I just shared.
Oh well, damn!
Wow. To my tens and tens of followers.
Yeah. But seriously, I'm not really. The show's only going to be talking about uncommanded discharges. If that's
be careful, guys. Don't get too pro Sig over here now. You don't want to get canceled.
I'm not, because you can't cancel me because I don't give a shit. But
okay.
So here's what I think is part of what's happening with the 320. There's two different things, and Mike kind of hit on this when he was talking about the whole mask mania, right? Is social media algorithms, bro. I was talking to my buddies. I said, yeah, I'm interviewing Phil over Sig and yada yada. I says, man, there's like two things in my algorithm right now, the 320 and freaking Elon and Trump, or the other guy's like, man, there's two or three things in my algorithm. It's hot chicks, the 320, and whatever. So these algorithms are designed to boost engagement, right? To attract advertising revenue, but it's also amplifying biases that people have, right? So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is this Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, and that's where a new product or a new thing comes into our brain or our environment. Like there's the Ford F-150's got a new truck out, right? And I love F-150s, so now I'm going to notice them everywhere, and as a result, I'm going to start thinking, damn, these F-150s are everywhere. And in reality, they're not. And the Bader-Meinhof, relies on selective attention spans, because everybody's attention spans getting smaller and smaller, and confirmation bias. I'm not a Sig guy. I've never have been. I'm a Glock guy. So it's conforming to my bias that there's something wrong with Sig. Okay. Just get that out of the way. But I think the more you look at it, the more, and this is kind of my next slide here. this is from the Dan Zimmerman article about the truth of the 320 lawsuits. If you look at just a few of the many that are out there, I'm going to give you a couple here. This lieutenant, he was, quote, performing a routine function check on his P320 when it fired at him without any force toward the trigger, resulting in the bullet impacting his left thigh, end quotes. So it's like, who the hell functions checks, one, a loaded firearm, and two, when you got it pointed at yourself, right? So you got another guy, a civilian, who said his P320 fired on its own, quote, when he placed the weapon down on his nightstand, shooting him through the palm of his left hand. Now, why are you pointing the muzzle at yourself? And then there's an unnamed gun shop owner down in Texas whose P320, quote, as he cleared the weapon, blowing off one of his fingers, the weapon was out of battery when it fired. And that's just all kinds of wrong. So I get it when you start drilling into these lawsuits, and I know, Phil, you've probably looked at the dozens and dozens that are out there. Most of them, I think, are complete bullshit. And that was my point with the when I brought up the Glock. It really was a training issue. What happened there with Knoxville Police Department guy, we won't name, is he was still going by the old training standards that KPD still had on the books, where it required the officer to put your finger on the trigger. Why? Because the revolvers required that you start working through that 12-ish pound trigger pull. And I would bet you hard-earned money that was the same case with NYPD when it came to Glock. So these kind of things happen when a new gun hits the market, or it's got something a little bit different with them. I'm not defending Sig. I'm just saying, guys, everybody take a deep breath and let's look at it objectively if we still can in 2025.
Well, Rich, you know, when I brought this up, first of all, and I know, Phil, you're like, well, don't be too pro Sig. I don't know if any of us are pro Sig necessarily, although I have not had a single problem with any of the products that I own, including multiple 320s, Wilson Combat variants, and 365s. But, you know, when I brought this up after dinner with Phil Strader, folks, for those that are listening right now to the podcast later on, Rich was very specific. He said, hey, man, if there's smoke, there's fire. And I think there's fire. And I said, well, I think Phil, he will come on the show. And here we are live on the show. And later on, you're going to be listening to this in the podcast. So there may still be some smoke and there may still be some fire. We're not alleging either way. I think the reality is our listeners and our audience deserve as much of the truth as we can present to them. And, you know, just like the phone conversation we had many, many months ago, probably a year ago, before the conversation we had at dinner recently, Phil, I said, hey, what's up with the 320, man? I need to know what's going on. I strap it on my side just like you do. Do I need to back off a hair? Is there something you guys are finding on the backside you don't want to admit because of the lawsuits? And who knows? Maybe you're still completely and totally full of shit on that. But right now, I don't think so, because I saw you shooting one the other day. We're not proponents for or against. Rich and I are simply trying to bring out the truth of the matter.
Well, but the problem is, I'm glad you brought that up. And I'll listen. I'm happy to address in any format or any way, or you can pose the question and I'll answer straight up. But the biggest worry for me is, you mentioned you wanted to know the truth. You were willing to take the time to make a call to try to find out what the truth is, and you do that by truth is a matter of it's getting information from a trusted source. And you used me as that trusted source to seek out the truth. And it's not easy. It takes work to do that. It takes time. It takes a phone call. It takes a little bit of objective thinking. It takes a little bit of effort. And a lot of people aren't willing to put that effort into their research. They're just saying, okay, Sig's been sued 17 times, which that so happens. I have my little thing up here. We have actually had 17 cases dismissed as well, but we'll call it 19 times but there's two extras here that I want to talk about at some point. But you took the effort, all right? And unfortunately, and honestly, listen, Tim at Military Arms Channel, he took the effort. He didn't have to come out here, but he wanted to know the truth. There's a couple of other people who wanted to know the truth. Robert Burke, the Sig armor, he was convinced that he had found this problem with the P320. So I wanted to know. I said, man, he messes with 320s almost as much as we do. So I'd love to know. So I called the guy. I reached out to him and I said, hey man, I'm really interested in what the problem is. Please help me understand. So what it came down to is, and no offense against Robert, but he said, well, we have a theory of what's going on. We haven't been able to prove it yet. So like, okay, well, wait a minute. So we basically had a conversation, and I had an engineer on the line with him, and we were just telling him what was going on. We were telling him what we were doing to test, why we thought his theory was flawed, and the fact that we were able to disprove a lot of the theories he had. And honestly, to Robert's credit, he looked at us. We were on a video call like this. He goes, well, listen, guys, I don't believe you. I don't believe what you're saying. So, and I listen, that's great. You have absolute right. You don't know me. So, you have no reason to believe me. But how about this? How about you? And it turns out that another guy, the Sig Mechanics guy, Edmund, I think his name is, we flew him out here. We flew Robert out. We actually did help him with his plane ticket because he asked us to. He took care of everything else. So does that make him a shill? I don't know. Maybe, or maybe it just makes him someone who wants to know what's really going on. The dude sat down here. We went through the factory. We showed him all the QC stuff we do. We showed him all the things we do to make sure that quality is our number one concern. We showed him everything we did, and then we sat down. Him and our engineers sat down. Unfortunately, I was out of town at the time when he was in town, but he sat down with our engineers and he talked to them for 5 hours. I'm not kidding. They were in. They'd closed down our offices. They were the last ones in there, and they asked every nerdy P320 geek question. And of course, our engineers love that stuff. They're engineers, right? That's what they love to talk about. So they talked to this guy for 5-6 hours, him and Edmund. They talked to them both. And after that, they said, wow, we were wrong. We showed them the test we were doing. We not only talked to them about it, we showed it to them. So don't believe us? Let us prove to you by showing you what's going on. So these guys, they went the extra effort to ask the tough questions and come here and get the answers that may, or in this case, did not align with where they were going. I mean, Robert had an opportunity to go forward with his theory, although it was flawed, change a part, actually in this case, make it theoretically even less safe, and sell it. And he could have made some money, much like he made some money on his disconnector, which, again, could have been avoided by coming to us first. These guys sought the truth. They had nothing to do with the SIG except for the fact that they know a lot about the products and they really wanted the truth out there, and they got beat up for it. And it's turning into the point where now if someone wants to know what's really going on, someone wants to know the truth, and they call us, or they reach out to us, or they give us a platform like this to let us say what's happening and the amount of testing we're doing and the fact that we've done everything we know how to do to try to actuate a firearm without a trigger pull, and we can't do it. All these plaintiffs, lawyers, teams of experts, they can't do it. And if they could do it one time, if they could make a P320 fire without a trigger pull one time, and that means not doing what some of these other internet clowns are doing by changing parts, taking out safety levers, manipulating guns in a certain way, which I can address that as well, which I'm hoping.
Yeah, I want to come back to that one, Phil.
If you could show it one time where it could do it, then all these 17 lawsuits that I just talked about they obviously wouldn't have been dismissed, right? In fact, the fact that it can't be replicated, and now the plaintiffs, attorneys, experts, and the teams of experts, and a lot of the internet people are now saying, okay, this obviously can't happen. I can't put a live feed camera on my P320 sitting there and make it go off. It's not going to happen. So now court cases are not even going in that direction anymore. They're not saying the gun just went off anymore. Now they're trying to build a liability against Sig Sauer because the design of the P320 is defective. They're not even trying to say that the gun is defective. They're just trying to say that the design is defective. But to that point, seeking out the truth sometimes is not, the truth is the enemy when it comes to the P320 or Sig Sauer, unfortunately. And it seems to be the case. In fact, I mean, we even populated a website. You can find it at p320truth.com, and it's basically every single fact, every news story, every court case overturned, every piece of news and media and updates, and frequently asked questions, and facts versus fiction videos. A link to this will probably be on there as soon as we're done.
Yeah.
If you guys are okay with it, you can
Of course, yeah. I've been on there. Yeah, you've got lawsuit. You can click the link and read about it. Yeah.
It's a website dedicated to facts, but facts are the enemy when it comes to the internet. So, I mean, and I know that's going to be a controversial statement, but there's one thing that can build. I mean, some people love controversy, and the great thing about the internet for those people is it doesn't have to be true. It just has to be fast, right?
And that's Ben Stoker's like, I love drama, man. He's making a video about
he loves drama. And listen, and if you pay real close attention to Ben and listen to what he says, and everyone wonders why me and this guy are still friends. I know we're not like hanging out and eating dinner or like me and Mike, and we don't talk every week or anything, but listen, he likes controversy. He says a lot of disparaging things about the company. I get it. But if you're in the business to get subscribers, and a lot of your subscriber base also like controversy, and they like to chime in, and they like to hide behind the keyboards and make the comments that a lot of people make, then he's feeding them what they want. And if you really listen to him, he's not saying P320s go off on their own. He's simply saying, do they? I don't know. And let's read the comments. And he's just fueling this snowball that Mike talks about.
Are you saying Ben is like the algorithm kind of? Ben is the algorithm.
Listen,
I wouldn't say anything bad about Ben because I know
if Ben thought there was a problem, if Ben truly thought the P320 could fire without a trigger pull, why would he have been using it for? I mean, he doesn't use it now because he just doesn't like the company and he doesn't like the leadership, and that's fine. I get it. But if he really thought there was a problem, does he think a tab trigger is going to? I mean, you deactivate the tab trigger by pulling the trigger. If the gun was going off without a trigger pull, what's a tab trigger going to do? Right? What are any of these parts going to do? So I don't know. I mean, maybe he does. I don't know. He does his thing, and I applaud him for doing it well, because
maybe Rich should invite Ben to the show. Ben, you have a welcome invitation from Rich to come on and argue.
And Ben, if he listens to this, which he will, or he will see it, and I would be happy to talk to him as well. But again, I don't know if there's a motivation for Ben to have me on. I don't know.
Let me shift away from him for a second, Phil. Because here's my question for you in that case. For example, Ben or anybody else that has a platform that gets on YouTube and he is very honest about liking to stir up things and cause chaos. I appreciate the honesty, but in my mind, I would think that Sig could certainly release their own YouTube videos on a regular basis, and I know they're going to get poo-pooed on, or Instagram, and I know you have this Truth and Facts website. So I'll speak to the CEO of Sig and your boss and whoever else is listening. It's like, what are they waiting on? What are you all waiting on to respond to these things, to provide the truth, to provide some answers to the public? Is that the lawyers with the noose around their neck, or what, man?
No, you're not wrong. Listen, there's a level of response that we as a company, we have to be relatively responsible with how we respond. Now, to your point, I am talking to my leadership, and we are actually going to be working on some YouTube content where I'm going to be covering a lot of 320 and Sig Sauer facts. And my goal, or our goal, is to make it just so factual and so black and white that there was really nowhere for the controversy to go. Like, here I am out on the floor. This is this piece of equipment, and this is what it does, and we do it this many times, and that's it. The chicken McNugget, McDonald's chicken McNugget argument. For the longest time we thought chicken McNuggets were made out of beaks and pink paste, and they actually had someone in there going, "Oh, this is actually how we make it. We go to Tyson's Chicken, and this is I want people to be able to see exactly what's going on with Sig Sauer, because the P320 is its own thing. The people are never. There's people that they're never going to trust it. If they don't trust it now, it's going to be hard to convince them otherwise. But the last thing we want is that misinformation about the P320 to translate over to a mistrust of the company. I mean, just because they're misinformed and there's this algorithm and this building snowball of hate on the 320. The company itself, again, if you've ever had an opportunity to visit here and see what we do, you know, it turns you into a believer, because it's like, wow, you can't fake this. We don't call ahead. We don't call down to the factory and say, hey, we've got a big YouTuber coming, and so let's get everyone ready to go and let's start really dialing in our quality control. It doesn't work that way. We just do what we do, and
Well, we have weird comments all the time on different shows, but like right now, Max looks like he's on YouTube, and I know Richard picked this up. Is the facts are that no other pistol goes off when jostled or bumped like the 320. And I don't know who Max is. Max, welcome to the show. But that seems to be, you know, the commenters, the public opinion, and whether some of them are bots. And I don't think Max is a bot, but who knows who these folks are, where those opinions come from. That's the popular opinion. And the longer Sig sits there and says nothing, in my opinion, I'm sure Rich will address this, the longer, you know, then that comment lives. And Max, thank you for your comment. Rich, I don't know if you weigh on that. So,
well, that Jason says, you know, my only issue, the whole controversy, is that the sheer proliferation of the platform would seem to require a significantly higher incident rate, but I don't know what rate that is. And that speaks to what I was saying to you guys in the green room. If you've got, it's some number greater than 3 million. Am I wrong, Phil, as far as how many of these platforms?
It's over 3 million 320s in the market. Yeah.
Okay. So some number higher than that. And the number that I keep seeing is there's around 100 of these under uncommanded firing, allegedly, right?
There's a little bit more than that reported.
Okay.
But
my point is,
like, actionable, where people are actually, you know.
And you got crapped on the military arms because you tried to bring out the number. Guys, well, this is 0.0003. It's cold comfort to the people that have had these things allegedly happen to them, but to hear that it's a statistical rounding error that doesn't exist. Okay. Which again, this is math. But the problem, and that's why I wanted to talk about the algorithm, Bader-Meinhof, and there's some social contagion going on here that makes it seem, and again, I'm not a shill for Sig. Don't own them. Probably never will own them. But I think but to this gentleman's point here, says, I own a P320 M18 California version. Everything is OEM. Should I feel comfortable carrying this is my CCW firearm? Phil, answer that question, please.
If you're,
I know it comes with caveats. I get it.
There's caveats. I can't just blanket statement. If you're a horrendous gun handler and you don't look your gun back in the holster, or you're negligent with how you carry, or you're carrying it in a wrong holster, or I don't want to say yes.
We're going to get to those issues.
If you're confident that your finger is going to stay off the trigger until you're on target, and you're confident that you're using a holster designed for that model, and you're confident that you're going to take your time putting the gun in the holster, and this goes for not just for an M18 California, this goes for any gun.
Yeah.
Then yes, you're perfectly okay with carrying it. Talking about I'd like to go back to Max's question. The jostled, and I mean, it's a silly question. I get it. Jostled and.
Hey, Phil, before you do that, he's throwing a clarifier on here. So this is Max again. Hi guys, not a bot. I had a couple of 320s, a 365, and several classic double action, single action pistols. Love the platform, but once these uncommanded discharge started popping up, I made a decision to switch 100% to Glock. So that rounds out his points.
Well, then, I would encourage Max to not dig into the details.
His comment is interesting, man. If I couldn't reach out to a Max Michelle or Phil Strader at the company that developed the line, I might very well have said, man, I like these guns.
Rich loves Fords. I don't know if that's true or not. He just said he didn't. Whatever. Rich loves, I was just going to say, Rich loves F-150s. I'll go a step further. Rich loves F-150 Lightning EV pickup trucks.
V8s, but I'm with you.
I'll never
F-150
convince
V8.
him to buy a Chevy V8 or vice versa, whatever the case may be. If Max wants to carry a Glock, that's great. But if it's because of uncommanded discharges that makes someone switch, then don't dig into the data. Don't do the research, because, and I'm not going to bring up a number of a type of firearm because it happens with all of them. But a major 3-letter agency, the most, what you would call the law enforcement branch of the land, that are very well trained, arguably, they average 12 negligent, unintentional, whatever you want to call it, discharges a year.
Mhm.
And this agency's been carrying a Glock for 30 years. That's one agency has more uncommanded, negligent, unintended discharges in one agency than all the P320s in the world. So do your research, or in this case, don't. Because if you're going to ban guns because people are putting their fingers on their triggers when they shouldn't, or they're getting things hung up in the holster because they're not paying attention to A, the holster type, or B, what's going on around their gun, or they've got, and this isn't just 320, this is numerous other guns that have discharges in the holsters, which we can talk about in a second. Then don't carry anything, because it's just statistics, folks. I mean, yeah, the 320 is in the news, and the 320 is getting all the attention, and that's what's popping up on these algorithms. But if you're using that as a determinant for carrying or not carrying, it's going to be a tough go.
Okay, now listen, I love these points that gentleman brought out, because I'm a Glock guy. I've been owning them and carrying them since 1992. So 33 years. I have a lot of trust in the platform. I will gladly shield for you, Glock. Just give me a phone call. But my point is, I appendix carry, yet I will not appendix carry my Glock 45 without a striker control device on it. You see what I'm saying? Because I think it's a little added safety that the Glock does not have automatically. Does that mean I don't have faith in my own skills and abilities or on the firearm? Maybe a bit of both. But if it's you have to understand there's an inherent danger to carrying firearms, period, full stop. Now, here's some of the things that I think are completely outside SIG's control. These are, when it comes to the uncommanded firing. Holsters were wrong holster for the Sig P320. That, I'm sure you guys see that a lot. There's a bazillion holster manufacturers out there. We're sponsored by 2 of them. I love them both. They make holsters for the P320, but people think you can mix and match these things, and folks, you just can't do it. Next thing we have going on is, because a lot of these uncommanded discharges are allegedly happening with police agencies. I would say the vast majority of them. Why? Because there's a lot of agencies that carry the P320. And guess what? By the way, folks, they got a light on there. They've got a TLR1. They got a Surefire X300, some other thing. And as we all know, I'm wearing a Safariland shirt, but I'm not a shield for Safariland. But they make some great firearms for the holster. When I was a cop, that's what I carried, and I still carry some Safariland stuff. But as we all know, you put a TLR1 on there, and now the mouth of the holster is extra wide. Why is that a problem? Because little fingers, keys, anything can manipulate and actuate the trigger. And as we know with the striker fired handguns, whether it's Glock or the 320, a good trigger press and the gun's going to go bang. Thirdly, poor holster design. I'm looking at you, Serpa, and others out there, because one of the ones that's out there is a female officer. She puts her 320 inside a Serpa holster and throws it in her purse. And now all of a sudden the gun allegedly goes bang while it's inside. And it's like, did you just throw that inside a Serpa and throw it in your purse and start jostling around? And anyway, so I think that military and LE armors, unit armors of varying, I've met some armors that should go nowhere near firearms. Maybe they're doing something they shouldn't be doing. Aftermarket crap being put on or in a firearm that could make the firearm inherently less safe. The Marine Corps had a problem when I was an officer in the Marine Corps. These young Marines were killing themselves. I mean, at record numbers. And we start looking at aggregating the data once again as to what the hell is going on. Well, what was going on is they're coming back from the GWAT. They've just survived Fallujah. They think they're invincible. They're a 19, 20-year-old young man. He got a shit ton of money from his combat deployment, and he buys a Hayabusa. But it's not enough to buy the Hayabusa. He's got to go out and change the geometry of the motorcycle. Now the motorcycle is inherently unsafe. and he kills himself. So when you start putting aftermarket stuff into the firearm, that's not the way it was designed per se. And finally, the thing that's way outside of SIG's control, and this is what I think Phil was reticent to say all in. Yeah, man, it's safe. Well, it depends. It's improper or negligent handling of the firearm, whether in the holster or not, can cause problems. So I say all that to say this stuff is outside your control. Now, let me tell you what, in my opinion, is fully within SIG's control. And this is where, Phil, if you want to obviously push back on some of this stuff, and Mike, you too, because you do carry a 320, you compete with a 320 sometimes.
Yeah, I don't carry a 320. I carry a manually safetied 365 or a manual safetied EDC X9 variant from Wilson Combat, all variants. And notice the manual safetied a long time ago. I made the decision to carry a double action first shot or a manual safety striker fired gun only in the appendix position. It just bothers me to carry something else. It has nothing to do with SIGs or Glocks or anywhere else. I will wear a Glock appendix sometimes teaching, but typically I have grown accustomed to a manual safety. Phil actually makes fun of me for that. But just for the record, that's what I carry. And by the way, we have like 50 people live on, which is a pretty good number for this live show. If you're on YouTube or on the Facebook, please give it a share. If you have a specific 320 question or even a comment, unless it's a worthless comment, then go somewhere else. But bring it on the show.
Well, let me back up because I didn't give a Phil. Phil, would you agree that these issues are way outside your control, man? Y'all can't do anything about this stuff I already brought up, right?
Oh, I mean, no, we can't. We can try to educate the people and let them know. I mean, this is actually part of our. We actually were just at the Council of Law Enforcement Education and Training in Oklahoma, where we're trying to educate them about holster choices and some of the challenges that we've been facing with holsters and it's to that point. I love Safariland. I carried a Safariland holster forever, and it takes a while to build a Safariland holster. It's really good. They're really good holsters, and they use these molds that take forever to make because they want to make them right, and they do a lot of fitting and to make sure there's no issues. And God bless them for that. They do a great job. The original 6300 series holsters, and this isn't just SIG, this is all of them. When officers started putting flashlights on these holsters, they had to make some quick changes. They had to we got to make this mouth bigger to fit these lights. So they did it. They didn't think anything about the walls of the holster being too shallow. These are some of the examples I've showed to another instructor based out of Oklahoma, and he had banned the P320 from any of his classes, and this is a guy who's very, very astute shooter and great instructor. And I mean, me and Mike know the guy, but he'd never even that had never even brought to his attention before. And he's a Glock guy. I mean, he is all Glock all the time. And I was like, well, let me see the holster you're using in the class. And I unloaded his gun was unloaded. I put it in his holster and I just stuck my finger in there and pulled the trigger on his Glock with a tab trigger. He said, how'd you do that? I said, well, I can do that. Here, give me your keys. I did it with the keys. I just threw them in there, pulled the key and made it happen. And he was blown away. He just couldn't believe this. He said, look, man, I can't expect a police department that has 200 old style holsters to all of a sudden go to Safariland or whoever and say, hey, we've noticed a problem with the holsters. The trigger guard is too exposed. We want to buy 150 brand new Safariland ballast holsters, which are awesome, by the way. I strongly recommend those holsters. Great holsters. But they're not going to be able to do that. So or some agencies are saying, hey, carry your gun. This is the list of guns that you can. Here's a list of guns you can purchase. Here's a list of flashlights you can buy. And here's some holsters options for you. They don't really have a lot of control over what their officers are buying, so there's no regulation there for some. I mean, this last one, the Saris PD. That police department, that school resource officer, she had the bag and everything on her right side. Something in the bag clearly got jammed in the holster. It appears on the video, but from what I've been told, and I could be wrong about this, but I don't think this was I think this was one of the firearms that she purchased and she was carrying. I don't know. I think it was just one of the guns on her approved list. How do we know that holster she purchased isn't an old series 6300 series holster, an old 7300 series holster? We don't know that. So to your point, we don't have a lot of control over what kind of holsters are used. And we tell these police agencies this. We're going to go. We just talked to Kansas PD last week. We're going to talk to Indiana State Police this week. And we're trying to give them some visibility as to, hey man, the holster companies are doing everything they can to keep up with the technology. And in this case, obviously it's flashlights on pistols. That seems to be the new thing. Now, flashlight companies are responding and they're coming out with slimmer lights. Like if you notice X300 lights, they have a certain lumen rate. Now they're making thin lights that only take one battery that have the same lumen output. So those thin lights now make your holsters a little thinner. So they're addressing the issue. We're just doing it. It's just not happening fast enough because there's 3.5 million guns out there.
Well, and that's another thing that you guys get crapped on about, and I don't know if it's justified or not. That SIG treats its consumers like they're all beta testers, and it's like, on some level, guys, we're painting the train while it's moving, because the technology is moving so fast. And I'm talking about holsters, lights, guns, everything. Everything's moving at a speed. And then you have users of varying skills and abilities out there. I carry on my G45 a Streamlight 7A because of that same reason. It's as wide as the firearm is. But anyway, I say all that to say that's outside your control. Now, what is inside your control? The modularity thing that I don't understand. A lot of things I think are solutions searching for a problem. So when I looked at when it first came out, I'm like, what's the firebox? I get it. It gives you some degree of modularity, but what was the idea behind doing the firearm that way? I don't get it.
The original, our original modular system like that with regards to the fire control unit was the 250. I know that there had been talk amongst in the law enforcement channels about when they were soliciting or talking about soliciting for a new firearm or a new pistol to replace the M9. There was a level of modularity they wanted to have. One gun kind of does it all. So there was a level of modularity that they were seeking. The 320 was just a way to kind of give them a one gun solution for everything.
So if you don't understand what we're talking about, the idea is I can take that fire control box and put it in a different size frame, and that would enable me to have more magazine capacity. Perhaps it's going to fit my hand better, et cetera. Is that what I'm understanding or no?
Yes. So yeah, you basically take the FCU, the fire control unit, and just switch out slides, calibers in some cases, switch between 9, 357 SIG and 40 when that was kind of a thing. Now 9mm seems to be the king, and or between 45 and 10mm. So yeah, there was a modularity component that was a cool thing. Is it so much now? Maybe not. It just seems like it was. There are people who have a 320 and have numerous slides, and I'm one of those people. I use one fire control unit for everything, and I'll just build up whatever gun I want to use for whatever competition I'm shooting. Is it everyone's doing that? Probably not. But at the time, it was. It was the hot thing.
Fair enough. I'm not sure what the manuals say these days, but as I understand it, in my opinion, the Sig P320 is not a double action only trigger. Double action only triggers when the trigger press does two things. It's cocking and firing, but the 320 striker is always fully cocked, fully energized, fully tensioned, whatever you want to call it. Thus, the P320 is, in my opinion, a single action only, because you pull the trigger and it just releases the striker. That does one thing. Now, is that in line with the messaging or not? You there, Phil? Can you hear me?
Rich, I can't hear you, buddy.
Okay, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. Are y'all still? Are you guys saying it's a double action only or single action only?
Oh Lord, they shut us down.
We can hear you, Phil.
Hang tight.
Okay.
Yeah, Rich, while we're waiting on Phil to get back, why don't we address some of these comments, man? We've had a lot of comments come up. We're trying to stick to this PowerPoint, which is cool, but some of them are pretty good. And I want to read Billy
Yes.
Miller. What are your thoughts on the evolution of the
Can you
hand?
hear
In the 80s, we had the single
Blink
action.
twice if you can hear me. Okay, I can't hear you.
One, two. Phil, we can
let's
hear
see.
you, sir. We can hear you. 1, 2, 3. Maybe it was the 320. Maybe the 320.
No, I can't hear you guys. I mean, that's great for Seeklander, but I wanted to hear Rich.
Well, blame it on the
Audio.
320, Rich.
I will.
Speaker. Try it now.
Test
Test,
1,
test,
2,
test.
1, 2.
I'm doing my tests. Everything works fine.
The 320 cancels audio, Rich.
Well, boys,
Phil, can
I
you
see
hear
your
me?
lips moving, but I don't
Okay.
hear anything.
I'm gonna text Phil. Mike, go ahead and
Yeah.
talk away.
Okay, so we'll continue with the show.
Hey, do you
We'll
want me to
wait
log
till,
off and come back on?
Yeah,
All right, I'll do
remove
that.
him and bounce him out and back on. So, Billy Miller, I like your comment. What are your thoughts on the evolution of the handgun in the 80s? We had double action, single action, and then striker fire with no safety. Now, fully cocked strikers. Maybe, yeah. Once again, we're talking about the evolution of technology and how fast it goes and whatever else. So, certainly possibility there. The SIG is a different system, which, of course, lends to its great trigger feel, if you like that trigger feel. Baron, interesting comment. Ultimately, the SIG 320 is just a product that is similar to products made by dozens of other companies. There is no reason to take the risk with the SIG when you can carry a competing brand. Okay, I get that. That's your opinion. Maybe a good opinion. Back.
Can you hear us, Phil?
Yeah, I got you.
Oh, perfect.
Back.
So I'll read that last comment. Again, this is the Chevy Ford conversation, Mike. I can't convince people. There are good striker fired models out there, and the only way, and there's good trucks out there, and I can't sit here and tell you that I've test driven a Nissan Frontier, a Toyota Tacoma, a GMC Canyon, a Chevy, whatever it's called, Colorado, or a Ford Ranger. I haven't test driven them all, so I don't know. So I mean, I can't sit here and tell you that you're making the right choice. What I would say is, if you're that passionate about it, then we're not going to change your mind. But how about try shooting them and make your decision, especially if you have confidence in your own ability, Ford Ranger, especially if you have your ability to keep your finger off the trigger. But anyway, so we'll go back to your design concern. So the action, I'll go ahead and address it. I know that the trigger action is a something that it gets brought up a lot, and I am an old school guy, right? Double action is, the way I define it, is the relationship between the trigger and the hammer, right? When Glock came out, well, I guess they didn't really come out with the striker fired gun, but when they popularized the striker fired gun, the days of trying to define them by the way the trigger reacts to a certain mechanism went away, because there are too many different levels of striker design out there. I mean, I could theoretically put a certain angle on a sear and have what level of charging do I need before it discharges? I mean, I get what you're saying, and I know that Sean had referenced it as a single action trigger. It's a striker fire trigger. It's a trigger that has relatively, and in fact, this is going to run up in our next case, has relatively the same amount of travel compared to all the other striker fired pistols in the market. There might be slightly less, slightly more, but within 1/10 of an inch, when you pull the trigger back on a striker fired gun, it detonates the striker. It either releases it, pulls it, releases it, or semi-releases it, one or the other. And there's one exception, I think, like an expert might claim, and that's the SW99, or that weird, striker action that had the button on the top that you could push it and it would turn it into like this weird.
Yeah, but nobody's heard of that, Phil. So.
Nobody knows what that is.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So Phil, on that, can you? So let's get into the detail. Some of these other details, and I think we need to finally address the elephant in the room in this podcast. Number one, in a tension striker, like in a 320 variant, right? Can you contrast that with a Glock striker or whatever else that is not as tension? So, for example, in a tension striker, if the mechanism that's holding that tension fails and there's no, striker block of any kind, fire and pin safety for those that may have grown up with Series 70, Series 80, 1911s, is it more risky, for example? If that thing fails, then is there enough tension to fire the actual round, where with a Glock, I would have to continue to cock the striker? Because I think that's number one. And then after that, let's just jump into the elephant that's in the room and talk about uncommanded discharge guns and holsters that we've seen videos that this podcast is literally all about.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
Okay,
Before
I
we
can
go
address
there,
that.
Mike, I just wonder if we start trying to talk about specific. That's why I've got a slide where I'm going to show you guys what the whole striker assembly looks like, and again, where I think that
Perfect.
there may be an issue, and Phil's going to
Okay.
get to slap me around professionally.
No, it's okay. It's fine. It's fine. So to your point, the Glock is there's two parts of the trigger pull that matter. There's the prep, and then the prep. What's happening is that trigger's being to actuate the firearm. You have to pull the trigger. The prep part of that trigger is, I don't know, we could call it 1.5 pounds, maybe 2 pounds of prep. And that prep, it does a couple of things. It draws the trigger bar back to the disconnector. It charges the striker, and it also deactivates, it slides against the striker safety. So that's what your trigger is doing with the Glock. Okay, if you take a finger off that trigger, then it decharges, it takes the safety off, it puts the striker safety back on, and you go back to square one. On the P320, there's also, and then to complete the Glock trigger is about 5-ish pounds, we'll call it 5.5 pounds. P320 trigger, when you prep the trigger, what you're doing is you're actuating the striker safety. The striker safety is the trigger bar is moving to the rear. It's activating the striker safety, which can only move up and down as if the trigger's pulled. And then you hit the wall. When you get to that wall, that's where and the wall from the Glock, by the way, when you've reached the wall with the Glock, you're fully charged. The safety's off. Everything's ready to go. When you've reached the wall with a P320, the safety's off. You've reached the sear. You're ready to go. It's the same from the prep point on. It's exactly the same. You're doing the same thing. You're releasing the trigger. Glock does it by hitting when you prep that gun, that tip of that trigger bar is now sitting on the connector. That connector, when you keep pulling the trigger, it just drops the connector and it releases the sear. On the P320, the trigger's moved to the rear. That striker bar that trigger bar is going forward. You've already disengaged the safety, and now when you keep pulling it back, it uses a lever to release the sear. So it doesn't move the trigger bar down. It just rotates the sear. So after the prep, you're doing the exact same thing with a Glock, with a Canic, with an M&P that you're doing with a Sig Sauer. Now, to your point, Mike, if we were to remove the striker safety, let's say, from all the guns, could it be argued that a gun that requires a charge could be safer than one that doesn't? Maybe, but we also have a secondary sear notch. So if that sear slips off by some miracle, because even if you were to take the striker safety out of the gun, the only way the sear drops is if the trigger's pulled. But let's just say something in that breaks. So let's break two major components on the pistol. Let's just say the only thing holding that striker back somehow, by some miracle, no springs, no trigger bar, no safeties, is just tension. If that were to slip off that notch, there's a secondary sear notch that the striker will actually also catch on. So, you're talking about removing every safety device in the pistol. Now, if I shaved off that second sear notch and then we took all those parts out, could I make the gun shoot? Well, probably. But I can also take a knife and shove it in one little part of the Glock and go doop and make it shoot. Does that make it unsafe? No, if I'm doing things and manipulating guns irresponsibly and taking safety measures and pulling safety parts out and doing these kind of things to make the gun shoot, then what are we talking about? I can do that with any platform. Hell, I can make a revolver go off in a very unsafe manner if you give me one piece to take out.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that second sear notch because I think as I've looked at the internals of the P320 for the last couple of weeks getting ready for today's show, thank God for the second sear notch, because I think, and we'll talk about it in more detail later, that is the saving grace. And that's where my head hits that one every single time as to why is this happening. But back to the issue, I think that It's roughly a similar trigger travel, total trigger travel as the Glock. I think you guys are around 4.44, 0.4, somewhere in there. The Glock's around a 0.49, something like that. So it's roughly slim. After the wall, though, there is a very short travel, and it's about roughly half the distance of the Glock once you go past the wall. My point is, and we talked about it, is that fully tensioned, fully energized, whatever the verbiage we want to use, striker. Now, I'm also going to say, I feel that on some of the times, there's probably with a light primer, because there is slight tension on the Glock striker. It's not fully energized, but there's a bit of tension on it. And could it pop a primer if the firing pin safety plug was not there? Maybe you could have a light primer strike. I don't know, but I'm not going to rule it out.
No, it would be. I don't know. Maybe. I don't think so.
Maybe, I don't know, but I'm willing to say possibly. But with a fully energized, there's no question about it. If it wasn't for, if the sear slips off the first notch, somehow walks off, creeps off, whatever we want to call it, but it should get caught by the second. Now, I think that.
Well, it would never make it to the second notch because you've still got your striker safety.
For you guys, yeah, and we're going to get to that in a second.
Well, even for a Glock, I think their safety, their striker safety only disengages when the prep is taken out of the trigger, because that little arm keeps it. So it's still.
That's what I'm saying. But if we don't assemble it with that, I mean, whatever,
well, then
it screws up.
I don't know.
Because we're playing what if game today. I hate to do that, but
I wouldn't recommend doing that. But
no, the third parties that I don't know what you guys do with regard to quality control. I know some of your parts are made in other countries, whether it's India or some other things. How does SIG keep up with quality control on some of your third party vendors?
Well, look, we use a company that's based out of India. They actually have factories in Texas now that we do a lot of sourcing from. But any part, regardless if it's MEMD, which I don't, everyone thinks no one else uses MEMD but us. But I got news for you: don't do any research, folks. Don't do your research, because
MEMD, just so if the uneducated, is metal injected molding, right?
Yeah.
And as I understand it, stamped parts have their own problems, as does MEM parts. And every manufacturer uses a combination of both.
No matter what you do, look, if you stamp parts, if you machine them, if you MEM them, there are tolerances, heat specs. The parts have to be heat treated. There is a level of quality that you can expect or not expect, no matter how good your vendor is. I'll give you an example. We had some strikers that weren't heat treated correctly in the 365 first got released, and we were using our new vendor. One of our companies had just set up a new shop in Texas. They were still lining out their heat treat, and they didn't. We got some badly heat treated parts. It wasn't many. Luckily, it was only like 1,000 of them. And that's when we started hearing about the striker tips breaking. It was something we didn't check for apparently, and we got past us. So now, and these are lessons we've learned. And I can tell you that our parts, any parts we bring in that we don't make, obviously every part we make goes through a lot of QC, a lot of quality inspection. It's pretty amazing to get out on the floor and see what they do. But also every part that we don't make, grip modules, polymer parts, metal injected molded parts, all those parts are brought into incoming inspections. So those parts aren't thrown into a bin. It's like, I guess they're good. No, we take lot acceptance, lot tests, and if it's a new part off a new machine, we'll do a first article test, and we're actually testing the metal, the hardness. We're actually testing it for dimensions. Obviously, we have a whole corner of the building that's dedicated to incoming inspections with all this inspection equipment that I'm too dumb to understand, and all these engineers are working on there trying to find parts that are bad. And if we do, we move them over to we either reject them or send them back. And that happens. It happens here and there, but we catch it. Usually 99.9% of the time we catch it. Is it foolproof? No gun's foolproof. In fact, find me a gun company that doesn't have things slip through the cracks, and I'll show you a gun company that doesn't exist. It happens. Even in the custom gun world, I've got a $6,000 pistol that's got a broken part on it right now because They cut a part too thin and it broke immediately. So it sucks, but that's just the way it is. But we have a really, really solid return rate on our guns. We have a serious QC process. One of the things I'd like to cover in a YouTube video, maybe. But yeah, I mean, it's people who say MEM is bad, don't do your research, because you're not going to want to know what else is out there.
So again, how some other things that really upset people is, number one, it ends today, the March 7th, 2025, messaging that was out there. It's like, when I read that, I'm like, man, whoever wrote that, and again, I'm not trying to get personal or making an ad hominem attack on whoever this guy or gal was. If they were attorney or crisis management PR firm, they should be let go. They need to go find something else to do, because if there was a way to piss off every gun owning American, I think they found the way to do it. So that's a concern. Then you got, it's not just Bobby Cox, but other people from SIG have said, no, they're 100% made in New Hampshire. Well, obviously that's not true. I would say 95, 99% of the gun is, but there are some internal parts that are not. Then you got the Milwaukee issue with some guns that came with missing safety lever springs. That's bad, and I don't know how and then you've got the whole, well, they changed their owner's manual. They're telling you that the damn thing, that they don't want you to carry around the chamber. I'm like, guys, these freaking owner's manual are written by attorneys and techs. They're not, and they're telling you, and I think all it said was, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, like, look, if you're searching for a safe way to carry the firearm, here's a safe way. Don't put around in the chamber. What are your thoughts?
Well, what it says is the most effective safety is to carry your pistol without a round in the chamber. That's just in that statement. It's in bold and it's in capital letters, so it got attention, unfortunately. But it's actually mixed in with our manual safety language, right? When we talk about what a manual safety is for and how it makes carrying a gun theoretically safer, because the manual safety, when engaged, it will allow, not that it says this, but it's just one way of saying it blocks the trigger bar from moving to the rear. So if you are negligent with your gun handling and you unintentionally pull the trigger, a manual safety would be safer for you. And what else would be more effective is to not carry around in the chamber. It's not saying that we endorse you carry a certain way. And in fact, I've gone on record numerous times saying Sig Sauer doesn't endorse any method of carry, whether it be round in the chamber, round out of the chamber, or not carrying at all. We don't endorse any of that. But the goal here is to give people options, because we have to accept the fact that someone buying a gun for the first time, buying a firearm for the first time, is no different than buying any other product for a first time. We have to assume, from a legal perspective, with our lawyers involved, we have to assume that someone buying a firearm for the very first time is a very first time gun buyer. They don't know what this is. It's an appliance or a toaster or whatever. I mean, we have to assume, we hope that's not the case. We have to assume that it is, and we have to also assume that whoever's getting this firearm is going to go into the owner's manual and say, okay, I'm going to learn how to use this thing. I'm going to read every word in it, and so I have a very clear understanding as to how to carry it. And we have lawyers out there who are trying to accuse SIG of being negligent because we didn't put it in the owner's manual that it's safer to carry around outside of the chamber. Yeah. So it's
can't make people happy. I get it.
Legalese for we're trying to educate the people on how to safely carry. Now, I will say, with all that said, and I've mentioned this before as well, again, if the owner's manual language scares you and you don't like it, don't do any research. If you do research, you'll never carry a gun again. Because I'm looking at one right now from a very popular striker fired and hammer fired pistol and rifle maker. And their quote unquote from their manual reads, caution, the recommended carry condition of your pistol is with the chamber empty, period. For good safety practice, comma, it is recommended that a cartridge not be chambered until use is imminent. That's in an owner's manual of a competitive company who's a major manufacturer. This isn't High Point or anything. This is there's another one in the owner's manual online. I got this online. Quote, always keep and carry your firearm with an empty chamber until you intend to shoot, comma, so your firearm cannot be fired unintentionally. Now, this is language that's saying you shouldn't carry around in the chamber. We are not saying that. So it's common language. Listen, if our language offends you, and or if you're upset that we changed our language on our owner's manual, gosh, we're sorry. By the way, never read the owner's manual of your chainsaw. Do you own a chainsaw? Don't read the owner's manual, because you'll never take it out of the box.
Didier Vival makes a comment, Phil. It says, but it came so long after the 320 has been out. The timing on the manual change was what was so shady. Can you address the timing on the manual? Was that something?
It sucked, dude. The timing was the worst. It happened literally a day before NRA show, so you can imagine how many questions I got. I can't address that. That wasn't intentional to go for that language to be introduced before or after anything was going on.
Look, can I ask you a question, Phil? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to be clear on this. Is there internal discussion going on that you're involved in? Like, we're going to drop it here, guys, and you could be like, can we wait till after NRA?
I don't know,
or can I get in front of the messaging? You know what I'm saying?
I'm going to say it. I was not involved in this language change. I would have liked to have been, but at the time I wasn't. I was the director of the Sig Sauer Academy, so it didn't make sense for me to be involved in it. But yes, I would assume that there's a group of people who are trying to find language that will stay in line with what we want our message to be, stay in line with what the general message is in the firearm industry, and also, protect us legally, let's face it, from suits in the future. Now, we did have language in our owner's manual similar to others. This was language that I actually helped write. It said, quote, "Do not load a cartridge into the chamber until you're ready to use the firearm." That was also in our manual safety language as well. And if your firearm is equipped with a manual safety, keep the safety on until you are ready to use the firearm. So we had language in there that was similar. This was just language that our legal team and a number of other people, I'm sure, thought that was the best representative. Now the timing couldn't have been worse, but
yeah,
that it wasn't in response to anything. It was just, listen, if Sig Sauer could work that fast, we'd be in pretty good shape. Nothing happens fast here. Imagine Sig Sauer is a big aircraft carrier, and we're trying to. You think we can just slide this thing around and make a U-turn? No, it's a 58-point turn, and it takes months for stuff like that to happen. But the timing was pretty bad. So,
okay, so I appreciate all that, Phil. So this is where we're talking about only uncommanded firing. This is where I want to focus everybody's attention: the striker group assembly.
Yeah.
And so this is what it looks like. This is it, just laying there, and then this is what it looks like fully energized. And we're going to kind of talk through some of the parts. Now, when I first look at this, first of all, it's beautiful. It's like a work of art. And I'm not shilling for Sig. I've already told you. Don't own one. Probably won't ever own one. But I'm looking at that like, what an elegant little design. I like this. You've got the striker safety lock operation. And when and if the trigger is pressed, let me back up. You get this right here. Mm-hmm. It moves
These
up.
Look like screenshots from our video at p320truth.com, Rich.
That's exactly right.
Wow. I love it.
Because again, I'm not interested in somebody's half-assed opinion, or they're just pissed off at the internet and somebody told them to hate the 320. I'm like, okay, I'll go to the website and there'll be links in today's show notes. You can go and read it too and get the information. So there it is. And it's a pretty solid little thing, but as you can see, it relies heavily on these two parts right here. These two parts are of critical importance, and that is the striker safety spring and the striker safety lock. But again, as Phil talked about earlier in the show, man, that the sear and that's most importantly, that second sear notch are of equal importance. But is there any way, let me go back to this, that spring, the striker safety spring, is there any way that can be put in upside down or in?
No, it's that design won't allow for it to be put upside down. One leg is too long and one leg's too short. But I will say this: if the spring breaks or the spring's not in the gun, the default position, unless you're holding the gun upside down, the default position is in the safety position. I mean, obviously, we don't recommend we don't even recommend officers or any armors work on these parts anymore because we actually have detents now that keep that spring in place to keep it from falling out. So now when someone's striker spring needs to be replaced, or the striker safety is rounded off, or whatever the case may be, we don't send them that part. We'll just send them the striker assembly now. Striker assembly is now its own part, so we'll send it as a unit. That way, it keeps people from getting overzealous with triggers and springs and safety parts and that kind of thing. So we just send it as an assembly.
It's funny you say that, because I was like, okay, I'm going to buy those individual parts and play around with it. And that's not how SIG sells it. They sell it as one
is that trigger group or striker group assembly. Yeah.
Okay. This comes in from Max, and I think we need to address this. Max, thank you for the comments today. Let's get it out here. This is what we're trying to do. Clear the smoke. It says, quote, "Don't do any research," quote, "is a slap in the face of your customers, Phil. The attitude to customers about the current issues is not helping your cause. With cross spear, et cetera, you're making it hard to trust." What do you think about that?
Listen, I think this is another example of we wouldn't be the company we were today if we didn't treat our customers well. Me getting, again, punched in the teeth every single day. Yeah, maybe I am coming off a little brash for Max or for your more sensitive viewers. But the reality is Sig Sauer is under attack. The company's under attack, and we're not going to sit here and take it. I mean, it's just there's a level of responsibility that we have to take to tell the truth to people. And the fact that I'm saying don't do your research, it's a tongue-in-cheek joke. So if I offend you, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. But the fact is you really need to do the research. Do what Rich and Mike are doing. Do the research. Make a phone call. I mean, I'm a pretty easy guy to reach out to. If you got Google, you can probably find out where I am at and what I'm doing and what my contact information is. And I'm happy to say the truth. If the truth is upsetting and the truth is triggering and the truth is, disrespecting customers, then that's not what I'm intending. But my only thing I care about is getting the truth out there. And if it's upsetting people, then I'm really sorry. It sucks, but I just.
Yeah, and I'm going to weigh in to Max's comment and a lot of other things. First of all, I think there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of customers out there that are fans, SIG loyal fans that love the guns, that are going, I don't know about the 320 though. I just don't know. And they're like like when you have a bad day at work and you go home to your wife and she is this innocent, pretty little creature, and all of a sudden you snap at her because you had a bad day. You guys are under attack. And I hate to say it, you're probably under attack by a percentage of real people that are somewhat knowledgeable, and by a huge percentage of people that are just love the same chaos and love this keyboard commando theme that has been created by the internet, which allows everybody to be really, really mean and hateful. And I get it, man. You guys are being punched in the face. But I do want to remind you and the SIG leadership that you got to say, I love you to the customers that are still going, I love SIG. I really love SIG. I'm just not sure. And I know you built a website, Phil, and I know you've done a lot of things, including come on this show. But I think your leadership needs to hear that. And they should have been a lot more aggressive. And you should have been on YouTube a long time ago addressing a guy like Max, going, Max, there's nothing wrong with the gun. Now, if you are maybe a newer shooter, maybe it's not the best idea to carry a striker-fired handgun with no manual safety in the appendix position without some really good training from Mike Seeklander or someone else. But I think you got a lot of customers that still love the company. The company just needs to say that and say, hey, we love you and we love our loyal fans, and we're sorry if we're a little irritable, but we've been really, really beat up lately.
But can I go before Phil, Mike and I, when we teach our firearms instructor development course, specifically to law enforcement, state, local, federal law enforcement, there's a whole block in there of how to handle these difficult pointed questions. And then when we role play it, we give it to them, like, why do police officers only kill black people? And, you see the leadership kind of start stumbling, but if you know how to deal with that, and there's a way to deal with it and there's a wrong way to deal with it. And I think to Max's point, man, SIG really
Yeah.
pissed me off and everybody off with that damn message, man.
We hurt a lot of feelings, and that's, you know, that's unfortunate. It was,
And you can't take it back. The internet's forever, right?
yeah, that's forever. And listen, I would challenge anyone who wants to know more about me and my stance on things. Then you know, I'm not a hard person to get in touch with. And I've listened to these customer service calls, and I've gotten the emails from people who, you know, will send the gun back because the trigger didn't feel right. And we don't say, what are you, crazy? The trigger's fine. We'll actually bring the gun back, and we'll test it and evaluate it, and we'll send it back for free. I mean, our customer service is second to none, and I'll stand by that. I've listened to the phone calls, and we know that our products are going out to save people's lives, or to protect people's lives, or in the military to you know, actually perform in the battlefield. We take it seriously, and yeah, to your point, we probably do get a little edgy when people talk about the fact that we don't care and we don't love our customers. You know, our customers are who make our company what we are, and you know, that's the reality of it. But there's also the reality of, look, it's just happening with other gun companies. You know, don't, like I say, I've said it before. Don't do, if you're not going to allow a certain firearm on your range because there's unintentional discharges, I stand by my statement. Don't do your research, because if you do, you're going to find out there's a lot of other guns going off unintentionally out there in far larger numbers. And if that is what you're using, if you're using either the data that you're reading about on the internet, or you're using the trace.com's interviews and anti-gun agenda stories, if you're using that as your decision-making process, then there's not a lot I can help you with, except to tell you what's really going on. And so, yeah.
Well, if there are other gun companies that have this, I'll be the naysayer in the room. Where are the videos, Phil? I mean, there's a lot of videos on who knows where they come from, and how many of them, you know, like if that many Glocks were going off, don't you think that we'd have all those videos? I know I'm getting into non-factual land, which Rich Brown hates as an avid researcher, but still, I mean, that's the smoke, the fire. That's the problem.
You're right. I know there was a video out recently, and of course, the problem is there's a video that came out recently of two police officers in Texas were fighting someone, and suspect got their hand into the holstered pistol. It wasn't a P320, and pulled the trigger because they got it, you know, it was in the gap, and they pulled the trigger. I know there's video evidence of that somewhere out there. I just recently saw the one where the guy was either into a range or at a police station or something. And he was putting a non P320 non-Sig product into a appendix holster, and you know, he put it in, looked like he did it right, but he didn't. There was clearly something in there, and he bent over, and the gun went off and shot him.
I think it was a Glock, yeah.
It was a Glock 43X. But and you know, of course, he pulls everything out, throws the holster, throws the mag, throws the gun, everything comes out, and you know, and I saw that video, and there's another one. There's an M&P holster going off, and M&P going off in the officer's holster. Apparently, a kid got their finger into the trigger or something like that. Seen that one. I mean, they're out there, but to Rich's earlier point, you're not going to hear about them. I mean, you got to literally do your research. You've got to do some work to find what's going on and see the statistics that are actually coming out there. I mean, you know, I found out about the 3-letter agencies, 12 ADs, UDs, NDs per year from an inside source, because I did the research. I was like, man, I wonder if this has got to be happening somewhere else. This agency started carrying Glocks, and they had a lot of ADs and cleaning rooms and shooting each other, and you know, and I'm wondering if it went down. I did my research. I talked to a friend in this agency, and I said, hey, what's the UD rate for you guys? I know you guys have been carrying not 320s, other striker fired pistols, very popular ones, for a long time, and they told me. And you know, and I was surprised. I was surprised by that number, but then again, I worked for an agency that we transitioned from 5946s to Glocks, and we had 11 in our first year. So I guess it adds up, right? but you don't hear about them because, Glocks have a reputation. I'm using Glocks as an example. They have a great reputation. I carried one for a long time of only going off when the trigger's pulled. So when a Glock went off in the holster, of course, the officer usually blamed something with the gun. They always did for us when we had ADs. And as it turns out, what do? We actually looked at the firearm, we tested it, we made sure everything was right, made sure all the parts were right, made sure the holster wasn't defective, made sure nothing was in the holster. And it was always came out to, well, the gun only fires when the trigger's pulled. And what people don't seem to understand is from a lot of the agencies out there who are still carrying P320s, if they have an unintentional discharge, they're actually doing their research. They're not to keep putting that frame out there, that statement out there, but they're doing the work to try to find out what happened. They're recreating the incident. I know of one agency that offered paid leave for anyone in their technical crew that could make a P320 shoot without a trigger pull, and none of them could do it, obviously.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't. I'm gonna take a stand here on something.
Okay.
I don't want Sig, and this is what I think you get my hackles up, Sig, when you guys act like there's never been a problem. There has been freaking problems with the 320. We talked about that earlier. You fixed a lot of them. So the way I hear the messaging is like, this is a great gun. There's no problem. There has been freaking problems. Those guns were shipped to Milwaukee without springs in them. That was real. That happened. Okay. There has been issues. So let's be clear about that, right?
Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that there's not a problem with possible problems with manufacturing or parts being left out. I mean, these are things that can be attributed to anything. But what I will tell you is inherently the P320 can only fire when the trigger's pulled. Doesn't care. It doesn't matter if it's with a jacket string or a key or a seat belt on a lefty coming out of a car. The guns don't care what pulls the trigger.
Right.
They're not designed to care. They're designed to fire when the trigger's pulled.
But see, I want to be clear about this because I think there was a time when you could drop a Sig sometimes at a specific angle and there was a concern. You guys handled it. You handled it appropriately, in my opinion. So now I think today, just July the 7th, the handgun can only fire if the trigger's pulled. I think that's what the lawsuits are showing, et cetera.
Yeah.
Although you did just lose one in Georgia to the tune of like 2.3 million, correct? And I'm sure you're appealing it, but that is a fact, right?
There was a judgment made, yes, for the plaintiff, but
that's a jury that's
fired without a trigger pull.
Yeah,
just to be clear, that's not why the judgment was made. And I will say the big judgment in Pennsylvania, the $11 million one, $10 million of that was vacated, and I'm sure we're working on the other $1 million too. Listen, we're going to continue to get sued. It's good business for these lawyers to keep going after us, keep claiming that the design is faulty. They keep claiming that that P320s, even though they only fire when the trigger's pulled, it's just still not good enough. These guns aren't designed to just go off when the trigger's pulled. Well, wait a minute.
Let me ask you this, Bill, because there's a middle ground here. So let's also communicate clearly that negligent discharges, Glocks came into an agency and they had 12 negligent discharges, whatever, their fingers were on the trigger, whatever, the trigger's pulled. I agree with that. Same thing with any striker fired pistol. In your opinion, does the trigger design, or has the trigger design, and I know Rich had something to add toward the end, make the trigger easier to pull in an untouched, uncommanded discharge in the holster? Because that seems to be where the videos are coming from. And I'll give you an example. If a key gets inside of a holster and hits the side of a Glock trigger, maybe it misses the trigger dejangle and doesn't actually pull the trigger, but maybe it does pull the trigger on a Sig 320. Could you address that? Because I think there's a middle ground that we're missing. Also, uncommanded discharges is not dropping the gun. I'm talking about a gun in a holster that is discharging untouched and uncommanded in theory by something by the human, at least, their hand or their finger. I'm not saying the light or the holster or the key is not doing it, but can you address that middle ground area?
Well, look, if you're asking me if I were to put my fingers on the outside edges of a Glock trigger and pull it to the rear, and if I were to do the same thing with a Sig trigger and pull it to the rear, yeah, the P320 trigger will shoot by grabbing the trigger and pulling to the rear by the edges. Now I can't sit here and tell you that the situation in California or the situation in Montville PD or several other situations where clearly things got hung up, either keys or bags or straps or whatever the case may be. I can't sit here and tell you that that would or would not have happened with a Glock, because again, I can tell you this, I can recreate every single one of those with both a Glock and a Sig Sauer. One's not more difficult than the other. It's not like I'm doing it 100 times with the Sig and I get 100 activations and I do it 100 with the Glock and get 50. It doesn't work out that way. It's still getting, I can still get the same result. Now the argument of is it easier? Would it be easier for a Glock trigger to resist those kind of things? I don't know. If that were the case, it's possible. But I guess the other question could be, would it be harder to replicate these if I had a better holster or a ballast holster? And I know the answer is categorically, yeah, of course it would be easier for it not to happen, because I've tried. I've put a P320 and a Glock and every other gun I could find into a ballast holster, and I've tried to force stuff into them and try to make the guns go off, and I can't do it. So again, if all things being equal, if you give me a 6300 series holster for a Glock with an X300 light, or a Sig for an X300 light, or an M&P 1.0 or 2.0 with it, I can replicate a trigger in-holster trigger pull literally almost every single time with every single platform. So I get what you're saying there, and I'd be remiss to think that there's Glock makes a certain tab trigger, Canik makes a certain type of tab trigger, Smith & Wesson makes a certain type of tab trigger, and every single one of them, they do the same thing. They're designed to do one thing and one thing only, and that's to keep the trigger from moving to the rear if it's dropped. Now, does the Glock have possible residual safety factors for negligent gun handling? If I brush my finger along the side of a trigger when I wasn't supposed to, or something touches it, look, possibly, but then again, anything's possible. But
good answer.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know if that answers your question the way you wanted it to be.
It does.
Okay, so back to the striker assembly here. Even if the striker safety spring and the safety lock fail for any reason, goes back to something Phil said a long time ago, or if the striker somehow walks off that first sear notch, the second notch on the sear should prevent the fully energized striker from hitting the primer with enough force well, that's the question, Phil. I mean, I'm sure you guys have done the testing. Let me think how I'm going to phrase that.
No, you're going down the right path. So,
well, talk to me about it. Explain it and then kind of maybe answer the question.
So if you're asking would there be enough energy for it to slip off the second notch and fire the gun? I don't know. I don't know if we've ever even been successful making that happen or not. You'd have to remove the striker safety lever. You'd have to also remove the striker safety lever arm, I think, or at least break the tip of the arm off to really give that a full test. But I know that in some of our when we first started developing this, in some of our really high drops, crazy high drops, like past 6 feet, we were able to replicate the sear being caught by that second notch, but we've never been able to replicate it going past both notches at once.
I tell you, that design, and that's why I'll go to this right here. I'm no armor gun expert, never been to a single armor class, don't know shit about it. I'm just the end user, right? The internal safeties, to me, when I started really digging into this, I'm like, they look pretty freaking good. I had a buddy of mine who's a mechanical engineer, had him look at it too. But then I have another friend that says, Rich, you're looking at it wrong. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And this is him. He is with a department. He carries the 320. That's him right there. And he said, if you think about the Safariland cant, the default cant that comes, and I think Safariland says it's 10 to 15 degrees. So it is putting that design in an awkward position, because we've been looking at it thus far horizontal. But now let's think about, because this whole show is talking about, I see SIG fixing all the problems. We're talking about uncommanded discharges. Okay. So now let's rotate that striker assembly. And my buddy, I'll give him credit. This is Andrew Keith. Mike knows him. SWAT guy, former Marine, really good dude. He had the Gunjitsu podcast. Anyway, he's like, when we look at it in this orientation, is there any way, again, if that spring has some issue, because I said those two issues, that safety lever and that spring are doing a hell of an important job. But then I go and I've circled it here on the image, but then we've got that second sear notch. So even if, okay, there's an issue with that, and oh, by the way, you're walking around, you're running, you're doing your job as a law enforcement officer, and let's say it walks off slowly off that first ledge, you wouldn't know it, and it would trip down to the second one. So unless that second notch is somehow missing, I don't know how these handguns are going off without being.
Well, there's several ways to address that. First is, your safety lever wouldn't be up, because the only way a safety lever can be up in the position is if the trigger's pulled to the rear. So that's not accurate. That would have to be is you'd have to have the safety either gone or the spring gone, and maybe there's enough to get that thing to go all the way up into the, let's just say that's the case. Maybe let's say the gravity worked that way and it got the striker safety all the way up and completely fully disengaged. There's a closing moment where actually the striker, the angle of the striker, if you take a look at that striker angle and that sear angle, even without spring tension holding that up, okay, let's say this right now, the spring tension is holding up that sear. Now that's not the only thing holding it up. Obviously the sear can't move unless the trigger's moved to the rear. You can't.
If what Phil talking about, guys, and I'm sorry it's not in this picture, there's no springs on the sear, but the sear actually has 2 springs on it.
Right. But even without those springs, we've even done this. We've taken those springs out to see if the striker would fall, and it won't. The angles of the sear is actually holding that, or the angle of the striker notch is actually holding that sear up. So there's enough pressure to keep that sear held up in the position.
Even when you invert the firearm,
cannot walk
you take
off.
the springs out.
We've even put in, they call them, our engineering nerds call them micro screws. So we've actually manipulated with micro screws to try to see how we can make this thing walk off. The only problem with that is the only way that sear will move down is it's got a leg on it that's attached to the trigger bar. So the sear can't move down because the trigger's not being pulled. So if you have to pull the trigger to try to address this can't issue, then you're disengaging the striker safety anyway, because that's the only way the sear moves, and the only way the strikers, the captive safety lever, that little arm, the only way they move to the rear is by pulling the trigger. There's a video out there. It was bashing the 320, where these guys were putting punches into their sears, and they were jamming these punches down and saying, "Oh, there it is. The gun shoots without a trigger pull." Yeah, well, when you really pay attention to the video, they actually are pulling the trigger, but the trigger's attached to the trigger bar. The trigger bar is attached, and actually it's in conjunction with the captive safety lever, and the trigger bar is also in conjunction with the sear. If I'm forcing that sear down, and you got to do it super fast too to disengage all the other safeties. But if I'm pushing that sear down, what I'm doing is I'm pushing forward that trigger bar, which is in turn pulling the trigger to the rear. So you're just pulling the trigger back using a different part of the gun. It's like starting your car from under the hood instead of in the driver's seat with the key. So I can do the same thing with that safety lever. I can actually take a punch and I can force that striker lever up with enough force, and it'll actually move the trigger to the rear as well. So all these parts are interconnected. So regardless of how you figure out how to punch things and manipulate the firearm, what you're doing is you're moving the trigger bar, which is attached to the trigger. Now, we can't replicate this in any scenario or any drop scenario. We've actually put these guns, Max's comment actually reminded me of jostling and bumping. We actually had a third party, and this was actually referenced in the military arms video. They just didn't spend enough time on it, in my opinion. But there's actually these trays and these contraptions. They put these on these huge vibration tables, and they modulated the frequency, the joule force, and all these different things. And they put every trigger we've ever made, pre-upgrade flat, which I don't even know if we ever made any of those, but we found a couple, post-upgrade curve, post-upgrade flat, and post upgrade skeletonized. Every trigger we've ever made for the 320, every configuration of the fire control unit, and they stuck them in these modulating tables for hours upon hours. They were laid up like this. They were put upside down. They were put on their sides, on both sides, and it was a loose packaging test that the military had to do, and a vibration and impact test. For hours and hours and hours, these guns just sat on these vibration tables and impacted. Even the old triggers never discharged. The new triggers obviously didn't, but the old stuff didn't either. So
where is that YouTube video?
What's that?
Where's that YouTube video?
It's on YouTube. Military Arms Channel did it. I think it was
To see the testing you're talking about, Phil.
Yeah, the testing's on that video. I'll give you
If you want to send it to us, we'll put it in with the show notes. Right?
We'll post all that stuff because that's certainly something I didn't know about. That's some of the stuff that Sig should have been putting on their email blast for the last year, probably.
Well, it is on the
Truth about Sig.
P320truth.com. We'll say that. So that's how you get it. Oh, it's at the 32-minute and 19-second mark. The only thing they didn't put third-party testing on there, which bugged me a little bit. But yeah, the table's insane. It's a huge table, and it just beats the hell out of anything you put attached to it. And it's pretty wild.
Hey, Phil, on a side note, if someone is fearful of their Sig, but they want to still carry it, have home defense, compete with, would Sig put a manual safety on an average 320? Is that something they can do?
We're talking about the potential of doing that. We're trying to actually, what we'd like to do is we'd like to kind of poll our users to see if they'd be interested in doing that. I think that's possibly the plan, because we want to make our customers happy, and if our customers believe that a manual safety can give them the peace of mind to know that they're not going to inadvertently pull the trigger, then great. Do we offer that service currently? No. But we also don't want to offer that service if we don't think anyone's going to take advantage of it. So is it possible? I think if it's not possible today, it could be tomorrow. And if that's a direction that our customers want us to go, our customer service reps, they take hundreds of calls a day. I'm sure that they will let us know if people reach out to them. I mean, obviously right now people are just reaching out with a lot of concerns about 320, and our guys are just saying, hey man, just go to p320truth.com, take a look at the website, let us know if you have any other questions, and then if it doesn't get addressed there and we can't address it, we'll give you to Phil Strader and he'll take care of it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So, and this is what I would love to see a test on. You take and I think it's a very, very wise move that Sig sells the Striker Group Assembly as a one-piece unit. You don't get to mix and match. It is what it is. And you all have changed it a little bit. I mean, I had a slide on it, but I took it out because there has been I think the Striker safety lock is much more robust and a little bit different than what it was on some of the earlier models. Would that be true?
Well, the Striker safety lever was, I think, originally a MIM part. And we actually did experience some broken in the field. Now, most of them were done by Max Michel, he puts a lot of rounds on his guns.
Yeah.
So, but when we discovered that, we switched to a stamp part for that.
Correct. And that's what the pictures, I think all the pictures I'm using today are of the stamped part. But anyway, where I'm going with this, Phil, is going back to that picture. If for whatever reason, I'm not saying the spring broke, let's say the spring is just missing, the Striker safety spring. And I did take the holster and do something bananas, like, smack it like this. Now, I know that the cam is not rolling and pushing that lever up, but is there enough inertia to do that? But again, I'm going to give you the out that the second sear notch seems to be the fail safe here.
Well, you have the second sear notch, but you also have the safety leg on the back of the Striker. So that's what's actually, making contact with the trigger bar. So even without a functional Striker safety,
you talking about that?
Yeah, that sear there, that leg on the bottom of the sear, the back, that leg still can't move down.
I mean, it could conceivably walk off that with a hard enough hit, but it's going to get caught by the second, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, the second sear notch will take care of that if it fell off A, the engagement surface with the striker, and B, somehow had enough force to push the trigger bar forward to move the trigger to the rear. But again, that would have to be one hell of a hit.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, because we're only talking about uncommanded firings. I'm not talking about, or whatever we're calling that.
Yeah,
and really,
what we're talking about is, I mean, as far as uncommanded firings, I'm assuming you mean the gun going off without a trigger pull.
allegedly going off without a trigger pull inside the holster. That's what I'm talking about.
There's not to go too far down the road and offend people and go back to my original statement. It's mechanically not possible. As I mentioned, we have more engineers at our company than every other gun company and competitive gun company combined. We have teams of engineers who have tried to make this gun shoot without a trigger pull. What people don't seem to understand is we're not doing it to cover up. We're doing it to truly try to find a problem so we can improve it. The same exact way we did with all the research and R&D and the effort we put into making the guns more durable at even higher heights, that drop requirements that would destroy any other gun, by the way. We're trying to find a problem. We want to find a problem. And, that's when someone tells me, hey, man, I think I know what the problem is. I call them, especially if they're trusted. I mean, I called Robert. It's like, man, that's great. Let me know. Please let me know. So let me get my engineer on the phone. We want to find a problem. We're trying. We're doing everything we can. And, and stuff getting into these holsters or people negligently handling the firearm. And, it's just.
But here's again, I mean, I don't want to go in a circular conversation here, but the 320 has had problems. They have been identified. You guys have corrected them. So again, whether it's the MEM part replaced by a stamp part or you fix the issue with the drop, I mean, there has been issues. And when they come to your attention, your engineers go to work and you fix them or replace them, etc.
That goes for any platform, though.
So of course, it goes for any car, anything, microwaves. I mean,
any SIG platform. We've had issues with other platforms before. P365 we were taking it in the teeth of that one. We had striker issues, and we had the trigger return spring that was out of spec. One tiny little piece of the spring was slightly too short, and it was slipping off of one of the parts, and it would cause a dead trigger. It wasn't very many. Luckily, it was very, very, very few out of the millions that we produced. But no one remembers, your successes. They just remember your failures, and we fixed it. We worked overtime to make sure that the primer drag. God, remember the primer drag? Mm-hmm. So we didn't. I mean, we fixed it, but we fixed it like every other gun company does. We just changed the shape of the striker to mask the same primer drag that happens with every other micro compact pistol.
Yeah, I look at the design and it looks elegant and functional, and thank God for the second sear notch. I mean, I don't own the 320, but when I look at the internals, I'm like, a lot of care went into this. I had my concern, and even if all the what ifs I could come up with, I still think the second sear notch is the fail safe. And going back to Glock, I love the Glock. However, the Glock was getting its ass sued off back in the 80s. I mean, they were getting their ass handed to them. And finally, they won one landmark court case in East Tennessee, and all the smoke started going away. And the reason why I didn't show any videos on here is because every time I look at one of these videos that's the smoking gun against the P320, I kind of look at, well, she's carrying this big ass backpack and she's got a bunch of shit and she's moving around, and could something get in there? Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a clear video of the guy just standing there with his arms folded and all of a sudden, bang! I haven't seen that video.
Oh, careful. Easy. You don't want to go.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Hold your arms. That'll get you canceled too. That'll get you. You'll be a shill in no time.
Oh, I know. And I'm not a shill for SIG. I probably will never own one.
No one take offense. I'm kidding. It's okay. Yeah. No, I mean, listen. We're convinced. And the great thing about knowing that the P320 will only fire with the trigger pull is now we know exactly what to focus on. We know exactly where to look. We know exactly what we're looking at. The moment of the fire. We need to know exactly it's it's always, there's always something around the gun, whether it be bags or backpacks or other bumping into other officers with keys hanging down. It's always something. But now we know exactly what to look for. And and so there's a level of certainty that comes when the gun only fire with the trigger pull. The first thing we obviously ask is, okay, what was around the gun when it happened? What kind of holster was it? Was it light bearing? It's always the same answers. And the answer is always, yeah, they had a light on their gun, and oh yeah, they had this type of holster. And then for our next question, obviously, can we get that holster? Can you let us know at least the part number so we can replicate the problem and see, and just to ensure that we can replicate it? And also, could we get the gun back? Or usually the agencies will take the gun and they'll do their own thing. They'll test it. They'll check, make sure no parts were broken, nothing was defective. And so far, no one's found any. I mean, Milwaukee PD, them finding the problem wasn't a result of someone shooting themselves or negligently handling. That was just a matter of the armor probably checking it and finding that. But we're not. But they're not saying that, hey, we found the problem. This happened in this. And the thing is if someone were to find a problem like that, we'd be able to replicate it.
It's like but that's a manufacturing issue. That's not a, speaking of Milwaukee or something like that, that's not a design issue. That's,
it's something you missed.
Yeah. And again, it's got fixed and you
Speaking
move
of
on.
which, let me address one more thing. I know this is a long interview, and I apologize for your listeners. But gosh, this is going to be great.
They love this stuff, Phil.
They love it. So let's talk about one thing. One guy that actually was able to make a gun, force a gun to shoot without a trigger pull. This guy that put a 10 millimeter takedown safety lever, which if you look at one and look at the other, there is a difference. It's a different part. All right. You can see that there's a difference if you know what to look for. And if you're taking this takedown safety lever out of a P320, you should be an armor, so you should know what to look for anyway. But we're not going to cover that. So he took a 10 millimeter takedown safety lever, and he put it in a 9 millimeter, and he intentionally put the gun back together incorrectly, because the reason you don't use a 10 millimeter takedown safety lever is because at that point you can take the gun apart with a magazine in it. And if you put the gun back together incorrectly, the trigger won't reset quite right. It won't, you won't get that rotation back up. And theoretically, if you work hard enough at it, you could make this striker perch on that not yet reset seater. Now, by the way, and I'm not saying do this, don't do this, but I have done it. If you put the wrong takedown safety, if you had a 10 millimeter takedown safety lever into your 9 millimeter pistol, if you put it back together correctly, like by the book, it functions, it shoots. I've used one, I've shot one. I just wanted to see if it would actually work. And it did. The only downside, obviously, is you could take the gun apart with a round or the magazine in the gun, and which is unsafe. With all that said, this person was able to do this, and eventually, they figured out a way to make it, the hammer, the striker release, but obviously the gun wouldn't shoot. They were using a primed case start, I think, because the striker safety lever was in the way. So what they took it out. They just removed the whole thing, string, safety lever, and everything. And eventually, I guess, I don't know how many times it took them to do it. They made this work. They made it happen. And then the podcasters started popping up talking about they had people on the inside saying that the 10 millimeter and the 9 millimeter parts were just thrown in a bucket and thrown on the production line.
Yeah.
That is categorically untrue, one. And two, what most people don't know, and this is, you guys are getting a sneak peek to the YouTube video I'm getting ready to do. What most people don't know is when a 320 or a 365 or any pistol we make is done on the assembly line with 95% parts made in the USA, assembled in the USA, by the way, rich. But when they're in the production line and they're going through their function test, right? Well, it's a multiple series test that we do. We don't do it by hand anymore, but we used to. And one of those tests were put an empty magazine in, move the slide to the rear, check for slide lock, and then attempt to rotate the takedown safety lever, 365 and 320. If the takedown lever gets stopped, then you know it's right. If it rotates all the way down, you know there's a problem. You've got the wrong takedown safety lever in there. It's never happened, but we still do the check anyway. Now we have a machine. It's called an auto gauge. It's incredible. It's a mechanical marvel. We put guns into this machine. We push a button and it does all the function tests, and it does it in seconds instead of minutes. And we've got guns that we've intentionally put together wrong and screwed up. And we try to fool this machine every so often, and it never works. The machine is infallible. It can't mess up. So we do that. We do an auto gauge on all our guns. There's a couple 320s that don't go through the auto gauge because they got a compensator and they don't fit. So big deal, we do it by hand. Then they go to the test fire range and they get shot and sighted in, depending on which gun it is and what contract it's for. And then after the shooting is done, they come back out for post-range inspection, where the guns are, again, magazines inserted, tested for lockback, and the takedown safety lever is rotated to make sure it won't work. And if it doesn't, you're good. You know you're good. And then they take it apart and they check for all the parts, the safety, make sure the striker safety's in, make sure everything's right. Now, this is Sig Sauer listening to its customers. I want to give you this example because this is something that I put into motion, because I was getting a little sick of people saying that we don't listen to our customers and we don't care about our customers. That second check, the second check for the takedown safety lever, it was done before the range, but I went to the quality folks and I said, listen, what would be the harm of us doing this check one more time? What would it impact? And they said it would impact us by like a second and a half. It takes like to go that and that, nothing. Because they're locking the slide back anyway. That's just one step of rotating the takedown safety lever. So now, because our customers were concerned, because there was this false narrative and all this smoke that had no fire of us mixing the takedown safety levers, which never happened and never has happened and probably never will happen. Now we have a double redundancy check before the range for function test after the guns are put together, and after the range, after post-range inspection. So we saw, there was no potential, but we wanted to make our customers happy. What do? We added a 1.5, 2 second step to our post-range process to satisfy our customers. So, is it necessary? No, because we check it before the gun goes on the range anyway. But that's just something else to address. These people on the internet just, and this guy even said he was just mad because of that statement. I was mad at that statement. I was going to prove them wrong because that statement upset me. That's great, but man, you can't to go on a podcast and say that we're doing this and this is what's causing these uncommanded discharges. It's not
right. And see, that's one of the things I kind of like gave a SIG an out for when I'm looking. I'm like, you've got 3+ million units out there, that you've got hundreds and hundreds of armorers out there that are managing a fleet or a suite of these handguns. I don't know to what level of training they had. I don't know if it's Bubba's got it and he could put some crap together like the 10 millimeter and not the this and that. But I'll keep going back to, you would have to really, really, really screw up. And still, I think that maybe that second sear notch is going to stop all the stupidity.
Well, I don't know. Yeah. I think that's part of it, but keep this in mind. I don't know the numbers, but I can tell you that when we do our rough handling, I keep going back to rough handling, and we talk about the second sear notch. When we do our rough handling for the P320, I don't know if we've ever. It's possible we have, but we've never had a gun slip off the first striker sear notch. So I'm not. Is it possible it's happened? I don't know, maybe, but. If that happens, if the striker's it flips off or it falls off on a drop, then obviously we put a pause on everything, review the high speed camera footage, because every drop is recorded, and we would probably take a look. But you're right, the second sear notch is a nice safety part to have, but I can't think of, I don't know of any time it's ever been tested and it's like, oh gosh, thank God the second safety notch was there, because it doesn't fall off the first one for it to be a problem. And if it doesn't fall off the first one, then even without a striker safety, the gun won't fire because the striker hasn't been released. So there's a lot of fail safes that people don't understand and don't know. And this is part of these videos, is to try to educate folks and let them know there's a lot of fail safes.
Well, I like this comment here, Phil, and we kind of, I guess, wrap it up with this one. It says, if the P320 is being unfairly maligned, this is absolutely the 2009 Toyota accelerator pedal stuck scandal all over again. He said, people swore the pedals were getting stuck, and it was human error and the spread of hysteria.
Format. It was a format.
Yeah.
Remember?
Well, when they disproved that, though, they showed that the the acceleration of the engine would never overcome the braking of any
Exactly.
vehicle out there. So
Yeah.
if you actually were hitting the brake, you could stop any car with a stuck accelerator. So very interesting comment, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And we actually we kind of stay away from the auto industry from a legal standpoint because there's a national highway traffic and safety association for a reason. But yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, this has been great though. I mean, I appreciate you guys giving me a platform to talk on. I'm actually I think I'm going to do another one of these tomorrow night or on another podcast for another podcaster. So. Like I said, I've been busy. I've been traveling. I went to Oklahoma where I saw Mike and some other folks and Cleet and we've been kind of going on this truth tour, I guess you could say. And of course, we just had Next and Summerfest, so I've been kind of pretty busy. But now that I'm actually kind of getting locked in this week, we're gonna start putting some content out there. Mike, to your point, I agree. There's a lot of things I want to do. Obviously, we're a big company, and there's a line that I have to kind of play the balancing act on, because you don't want to get too tongue in cheek because you'll offend people, right? I mean, we saw it today where I made a little bit of a joke and it didn't go well, and Max was offended, and I apologize to Max, and I don't want to offend anyone, but it's the way it is. But there's also where you don't want to sound like you're just a shill talking, about, the 320 is the safest, most tested gun. Yeah, I know that. We keep saying that. How about you show us how you're testing these parts? Show us what that machine do. What does that machine do? So I really want to be able to show just kind of what we do here. And I don't want to, me saying that the 320 is the most tested firearm in our platform. That goes without saying. It's doing that out of defense. It's trying to.
Well, the problem is, right now you're playing catch up. You know what I mean? It's like, but you'll get ahead of it, and then hopefully you guys can stay in front of it from here on out. 777 ATM says, thanks for having Sig to talk for themselves and not speculate like other YouTubers. Well, I appreciate that, sir. Mike, any further questions for Phil? I think I've done all the damage I can do.
No, man, I think we've covered it. This was an attempt at being honest and open and getting you on the show, preluded by our dinner conversation and the previous conversation where I was legitimately asking, dude, what's up with this gun? Am I good with it? Should I change some things out? Should I? And based on your response and Max's response, I probably would have said, I think I'm going to switch to Glock 47 quietly and done whatever. So this is all about being honest.
That's not the first call I got like that either. I mean, I got other calls from concerned people who trusted me and knew, hey, Phil, you work for Sig and I trust you. We got a long history together. What's going on? And I told them. And same exact conversation I had with you. Same exact conversation I had with Marshall. Same exact conversation I had with the USPSA board of directors. When they had an area director go on a podcast that was beating up on Sig and making false accusations, and I don't want to sit here and say that they were a part of it, but it became a concern, and it took one spark to light a fire of, is USPSA going to ban the 320? So I reached out to the board, and and I educated them about what's really going on, and I've had the same conversation, maybe not 2 hours, about almost an hour, over an hour, with the board to explain to them what's really going on. So they would be armed by facts, armed themselves with the truth, armed themselves with what's really going on. So if they feel like they have to represent USPSA on a podcast, which I don't think they should be doing anyway, but if they do, at least they're armed with knowledge from someone they maybe trust, because I still know a few of the board members, and they know my background and my reputation. So, that's I'm just trying to do. I'm just trying to spread the truth and let people know what's really going on. And I'm going to get beat up on it on the internet. I get that. That's why you never read the comments, folks. Never read the comments. But glad you guys had me on. Mike?
Yeah, and we'll close with this, folks. I mean, Rich and I certainly cannot say we're not there with Phil that there's nothing wrong with the 320. There's been nothing wrong with mine, but I can say this, that I honestly believe that the company, even though they have certainly made some, in my opinion, some communication and some actionable mistakes on how they handled certain things, is avidly looking for an issue if there ever becomes an issue. And number two, if there is an issue, they will fix it. We've brought that up multiple times. Rich was really good at that, saying there has been a problem here and there. And this is exactly how SIG dealt with it. So those on the internet that are naysaying that, the history is out there. You know, and the individual shooters in our audience, your decision to use a 320 or carry the 320 in whatever configuration is yours. Like I said, way before the 320 issues, I would not have told my students to carry a striker fired handgun without a manual safety in the appendix position. It was not my preference, but that was always communicated as my preference. Right now, I can tell you this is my competition SIG 320, and I will continue to shoot it and draw it aggressively hundreds, if not thousands of times, and be completely confident with every single part. And I am not paid by SIG, and I am not a shill for SIG. I'm just simply saying what I will do based on the facts that I have found during the research I've done over the last several months, and in addition to the research that Rich has done. So Phil, thanks for coming on, man. Rich, I'll let you close this one out because you did the most of the work on this one.
No, man, I really, you know, I know you. I know your reputation. I respect you. Again, I've known you for almost 20 years. You're a man of your word and integrity. And thank you for coming on and taking some of the YouTube questions that people have. And I think you represented your company and your product incredibly well today, brother. So thank you again for doing what you did.
Yeah, man, you're welcome. I saw another question about what podcast I'm going to be on. You can find that out by going to p320truth.com.
There you go. Thanks, Phil.
Mike, I'm going to give you one of these next time I see you.
Yeah, I hear you, folks. Hey, folks, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching wherever you are. Don't forget, our goal is to bring information to you as much and as detailed as we possibly can to arm you to do whatever you decide to do, because the fight is coming. Be ready.